Chapter 1370. You need to understand my difficulties. My white ghost squadron has already been mobilized into the land and plain, and they're currently engaged in a fierce battle against the invaders. Stone Dragon Squadron? No, they still need to protect the family's headquarters. Once they leave, my rear will be empty. I'm sorry, Andrews. I want to help you, but I'm also short of manpower. So, looking at the helpless expression on Nicola's face in the magical crystal, Andrew's anger was almost overflowing. However, the only thing he could do was to cut off the long-distance communication and make that ugly old face disappear from his sight. The only light source in the room was dimmed, and the whole secret room looked dark and gloomy, just like his current mood. Even Tier 4 wizards had their own social circles. Andrews contacted 3 of his friends in one go, but all of them rejected him tactfully. Andrews knew that even if these guys had some spare manpower, they would not lend it to him easily. The demon wave period was very long, and every family had to give everything they had to survive. How could they let someone else take advantage of them? Even if they had spare manpower, they would try their best to use it as a mobile force in case something unexpected happened. Therefore, this kind of action of his was completely futile, and he had sent his old face to be slapped by others for nothing. A small rune was still floating on the dim communication crystal. It was the magic brand that connected him to the Crimson family. With a light tap, he would be able to contact the legendary fire wizard Grimm, who was renowned throughout the central continent. However, for some reason, he hesitated for a long time and did not press the button. Andrews knew that if he pressed the button now, the independence of the Arden family would be gone in the future. How could he repay this favor in the future if he relied on the Crimson family to survive this crisis? However, everything that had happened in the family's territory left him with no room to maneuver. If he mobilized all the wizard troops in the secondary planes to help the family, it was possible that the family could survive the first wave of the demon wave. However, it would also mean that the 3 secondary planes would fall into chaos, and the Arden family might be out of control forever. Besides, there would be a second, a third, and a 4th demon tide. Even if the Arden family could survive the 100-year demon tide, they would suffer a great loss, and their foundation would be unstable. Thus, Andrews hesitated for a long time before he finally reached out and lit up the rune. The discussion with Grimm was extremely simple and easy to the point that Andrews doubted his own ears. The first batch of magic machine legions would arrive at the Great Spatial Rift in 7 hours. Their flagship, the Viscero, would also be responsible for clearing the abyssal demons that had broken into the Alden family's territory. As for the reward, if a rank 3-star beast corpse could be considered as a reward, then Grimm's asking price was not high. This caused Andrews, who was already prepared to hand over half of his family's territory, to be somewhat astonished. After ending the call, Andrews personally called for the closest and most caring person in the family, the rank 3 Magus Han, and had him bring the rank 3 Astral Beast corpse to the Blazing Flame Monarch. 5 hours after the family's emissary set off, a giant silver-white airship that covered half of the sky slowly entered the Arden family's territory. It did not change its course to chase after the scattered demons that were scattered all over the territory. Instead, it flew straight towards the Great Spatial Rift. Dark red smoke was still spreading near the Great Spatial Rift. Wherever the filthy energy went, the soil would rot and rocks would shatter. The chaotic and disorderly laws of the Abyss and the Magus world's planar laws intertwined and collided, devouring and annihilating each other, leaving countless distorted fragments of the laws in the void. At this moment, the Great Spatial Rift was like a plain gate that led straight to the Abyss realm. Every once in a while, the space fissure would shake, and close to 100 demonic creatures of various ranks would come out from it. Most of them were relatively low-level demonic creatures, with 1 or 2 coarse-skinned, thick-fleshed longhorn demons and Vrock demon scouts who specialized in scouting. It was a pity that the space faults and space-time fragments near the Great Space Gap were too dense for them to see their surroundings clearly before they were minced into broken corpses by the void that looked like a roller knife array. Their body parts were scattered all over the ground. But their efforts were not in vain. As more and more evil demon blood contaminated the land, the demonization of the land near the great spatial rift became faster and more obvious. Even the breeze that blew in their faces carried a scorching and ruthless aura unique to the Abyss realm. Along with the abyssal demons, there were also some strange creatures from other planes that had crossed over. They obviously did not get along with each other. Once they crossed over, the first thing they did was to crazily attack and kill each other. Originally, they were fighting on their own, but as the number of monsters increased, they gradually divided into two different camps: the abyssal demons and the alien monsters. All the abyssal demons gathered together and launched fierce attacks on the non-abyssal creatures and the alien monsters. There were fighting figures everywhere at the edge of the great spatial rift. Broken corpses and tyrannical figures were everywhere. Of course, there were also many demons and alien monsters who disdained this kind of internal strife. They broke away from the entanglement of the enemies and charged toward the densely packed war wizard towers not far away with earth-shaking steps. After more than a month of killing and destruction, the originally compact combination of the wizard tower and the war wizard tower now had many gaps in their defense. Nearly 100 of the 20-meter-tall war wizard towers had been toppled, and the edge of each collapsed and burned wizard tower was densely packed with a thick pile of monster corpses. It was obvious that the abyssal demons had paid a huge price to break through the defense line of the wizard towers of the Arden family. But this small loss was nothing to the Abyss realm, which was 100 or even 1,000 times larger than the wizard world. The Abyss realm was constantly launching dimensional expeditions against other worlds. The wealth, resources, and souls they plundered became a part of the Abyss realm, strengthening the filthy, evil, and twisted will. Any great lord of the Abyss realm had a huge territory and army that could rival the wizard world. Their army covered the mountains and plains, and their food was the flesh and blood of the alien creatures. Therefore, when any of the abyssal lords set their sights on the wizard world, they would only bring endless war and destruction to Andrews. As if sensing the arrival of the war, the speed at which the space fisher spat out the evil demons increased. Finally, with a wave of dense ripples in the dimensional space, a level 4 high-level evil demon lord finally broke free from the space shackles and transmigrated to the wizard world. As soon as it emerged from the space fissure, its huge and ferocious body was firmly locked in place by countless law chains that extended from the depths of the void. Its powerful and surging aura of a lord seemed a little dispirited due to the suppression of the dimensional laws. Finus roared angrily, its 4 stone-like short hooves firmly stepping on the black soil. Its huge body that was shaped like the torso of a giant dragon was crazily twisting and struggling. Countless sharp evil demon thorns collided with the law chains and twisted, bringing unprecedented damage to Finus' body. But as it crazily twisted and struggled to break free, the space for its main body to move became more and more spacious. Finally, when the beheading sword that was burning with terrifying abyssal flames and covered with crisscrossing sharp teeth appeared in Finus' hand, the dimensional suppression of the wizard world on it was reduced to the lowest level. Finus raised the beheading sword high and let out a sharp, beast-like howl toward the will of the plane that controlled the whole world. That hideous and twisted face, that giant beheading sword that was burning with purple flames, that bloody mouth that bared its fangs. The unique tyrannical and cruel aura of the abyssal demons was displayed without a doubt. A bloodthirsty demonic aura instantly surrounded its body, challenging the will of the plane of the wizard world right from the start. This was the first time Captain Locke had seen such an arrogant, tyrannical, and ungrateful fellow. Locke gently fiddled with a monitoring crystal and silently observed the tyrannical abyssal lord from various angles. He clicked his tongue in admiration and issued battle orders to his many subordinates in the command hall. It's just a demon from another dimension. Why is it so fierce? At the next moment, a dark red light flashed on the bow of the Viscero's ship, that was floating above the wizard pagoda of the Alden family. A 3-meter-thick beam of light streaked across the battlefield and hit the body of the Abyssal Lord. In the face of this sudden magical attack, the Abyssal Lord Finus swung his arm horizontally and blocked the attack with his gigantic flame-beheading sword. The light of annihilation of the giant magic cannon and the abyssal flames of the flame-beheading sword clashed, and a terrifying, blinding light erupted. When the strong light was gradually extinguished along with the end of the giant magic cannon, the figure of the Abyssal Lord Finus, who was standing proudly in front of the space crack, was once again revealed. Visible to the naked eye, a 1-meter-wide hole appeared on the flame-beheader sword and Finus' sturdy body. Through this large hole, one could see the scorched and scorching earth behind Finus, as well as the dripping purplish-black blood and nearly half of his internal organs that had been scorched. It was obvious that the Abyssal Lord did not manage to block the full power of the giant magic cannon. In the end, the light of annihilation still managed to damage its tall and majestic demonic body. However, any creature that suffered such a terrifying injury would have been dead for sure. But to Finus, it was just enough to inflict serious injuries. Chapter 1371. The first batch that came out of the spatial rift were 30 Vrom. They were strange, flying demons that looked like large bats. Their bodies were thin and shriveled, but they had abnormally wide, demonic wings. They circled in the sky like vultures hunting for prey. Their attacks were swift and fierce, and their lethality mainly relied on their sharp claws and feet. Although the abyssal demons all had a pair of demonic wings on their backs, most of the demons were short and stout, and their weight was seriously excessive. It was impossible for them to fly with those decorative demonic wings. For example, the quaset that looked like a skinning toad and the longhorn demon that was known for his barbaric charge. No matter how hard they flapped their demonic wings, they could only barely float half a meter above the ground. This kind of altitude was better than nothing, and it was not worthy of the word flight. Among all the abyssal demons, the ones with the strongest flying ability were probably the Vrom. Their bodies were thin and light enough, which was why they could spread their wings and soar in the sky. With their violent spells and sharp claws, the threat they posed was not to be underestimated. Although the Vrom's close combat ability was average, with their superb flying skills, they still successfully squeezed into the ranks of the intermediate demons. And most of them played the role of scouts and scouts under the Demon Lord. Seeing their big boss, the Demon Lord Finus, being injured by the strange flying ship in the distance, all the Vrom raised their heads and let out strange cries similar to the cries of apes. They spread their wings and rushed into the sky. They flew in circles at high speed in the sky, avoiding the black and terrifying cannons at the bow of the silver ship, and rushed toward the spacious flight deck behind it. But before they could get close, rows of combat magical equipment with black muzzles stood at the edge of the flight deck of the Vrom. In the next second, a blinding light flashed, and magic fireballs smashed into the flying group of Vrom. Most of these were Grade 2 creatures, and only 1 or 2 chief-level fellows barely managed to climb up to Grade 3. Faced with the storm of magic fireballs, they shrieked and shrieked. They did not even have the time to change their direction before they were engulfed by the exploding flames. Wherever the Crimson Fleet went, there would always be a large group of battle magic machines following them. Almost everyone in the sorcerer world knew about this. Unfortunately, these Vrok demons didn't know. Although the abyssal demons had strong fire resistance due to their physiques, they still hadn't reached the point of being immune to fire. Therefore, the huge amount of fire attacks still caused serious magic damage to them. In the blink of an eye, 7 of the 30 Vlos, whose average level was as high as Tier 2, fell from the sky, their bodies charred black. However, from the way they struggled as they fell, it could be seen that only 2 of them died directly, while the other 5 were only heavily injured. Damn it, the fire resistance of these demons is too high. I can't even touch them. All combat units, pay attention, switch to using frost rays. The goblin mechanics in charge of commanding the magic machine shouted. With a series of clanking sounds, The next round of attacks was no longer magic fireballs, but a dense rain of frost rays. Apart from the frost rays, there were also goblin fire arrows that had their explosive power boosted as well. They were only as thick as an adult's arm and a meter long. They were filled with a large number of arcane crystals and metal bullets. Every goblin fire arrow charged into the group of demons with an ear-piercing screech. The violent collision would cause the arcane crystal shards to explode with terrifying explosive power. The energy shockwave carried a shocking amount of metal bullets and exploded in the densest area of the demons. That scene made every human who witnessed it feel extremely satisfied. The wild explosive force bestowed the metal bullets with extraordinary lethality. Pew. Amidst the dense rain of attacks, the Vrock demons that were caught up in the shockwave rolled wildly with the storm, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Bloody holes the size of a finger suddenly appeared, and purplish-black blood sprayed out from within. The 30-man Vrock demon team suffered heavy casualties after only 3 rounds of attacks. Other than the 2 Grade 3 elite Vrock demons that dragged their broken bodies out of the enemy's attack range, the rest were all killed by the Magic Machine Legion's attacks. The 2 elite Vrock demons screamed mournfully as they flew around in the sky, but they no longer dared to easily step into the enemy's line of fire. Demon Lord Finus, who was standing still and silently absorbing the abyssal aura from the large spatial rift to repair his body, raised his head and widened his bloodshot eyes. He simply couldn't believe his eyes. That was a small team of mid-grade Vrock demons. Even in the Abyss world, it would be a pretty good air assault force. But in this sorcerer world, they were mostly killed before they could even touch the enemy. Finus took a deep breath. For the first time, he regretted his recklessness. However, the abyssal demons were indeed violent demons that only knew how to kill. Its rationality only lasted for 3 seconds before it was engulfed by the pungent smell of blood on the battlefield. Finus once again let out an angry roar towards the sky, urging every demon that had just been teleported over to attack the enemy in the distance. The bloody and cruel battlefield, the ground covered in purplish-black blood, and the broken bodies of the demons, coupled with the demon lord's provocative battle roar. Teams of abyssal demons had just teleported over, and without waiting for their bodies to adapt to the environment of the dimension, they all roared and threw themselves into battle. The war wizard pagodas also started to show their might, the bodies of the pagodas condensing colorful elemental radiance, or turning into bolts of lightning, or turning into bone-chilling ice blades and ice spears, or transforming into earth spikes that covered the ground. No matter which one it was, it could bring terrifying damage to the gathered abyssal demons. On the battlefield, no matter how powerful the individual abilities of the abyssal demons were, or how outstanding their magic resistance was, they were unable to defend against the continuous attacks of a dozen war wizard pagodas. Their tall bodies were torn into pieces, and the scattered corpses were bombarded into purplish-black blood paste, mixing with the black soil that was splattered everywhere, and it was difficult to separate them. However, within the torrential wave of wizard spells, there were also a large group of mid-level and high-level demons that relied on the precise teleportation spell to appear beside the war wizard pagodas. Every time this happened, it was the time for the wizard beasts to pounce forward bravely and fight them to the death. A simplified version of the war wizard pagodas was mostly only 20 to 30 meters tall, and there were almost no living or experimental facilities within them. They only retained the basic offensive and defensive wizard formations and a small-scale energy pool. The war wizard pagodas did not have an elemental altar, and they were unable to absorb the drifting magical energy from the void of the dimension. Its operation was supported by the small-scale energy pool that was connected to the energy of the real wizard pagodas, and thus it was only a peripheral wizard facility of the wizard pagodas. It was precisely because of its simplicity and shrinkage that it could not use the same level of materials and resources as the wizard pagodas. Thus, Even the war wizard pagodas could not withstand the unbridled collisions and slashes of the muscular abyssal demons that were 7 to 8 meters tall and weighed several tons. Thus, the wizard beasts guarding the perimeter of the war wizard pagodas became the only cannon fodder that could stop the abyssal demons. However, even though both sides were cannon fodder, the cannon fodder on the other side was far stronger than the cannon fodder on the other side. The abyssal demons were all tall and strong, and their bodies were covered in tough demonic scales and thick armor of blasphemy, coupled with the powerful spells that they could instantly cast. In front of the demons, the wizard beasts were like hounds facing ferocious lions and tigers. No matter how fearless and brave they were in battle, they would still be chopped up like melons and vegetables by the other party. The Crimson Flame Demon was a type of low-level demon, also known as a flame demon. It was the beginner form of the mid-level Ash Lord. If the Ash Lord could take another step forward, it would become a terrifying flame demon that could burn the heavens and destroy the earth. Hence, Tier 1 Crimson Flame Demons were one of the abyssal demons that specialized in range attacks. Seeing the Longhorn Demons, Quasits, and Berserk Demons in front of them slaughtering the wizard beasts in a frenzy and charging toward the Wizard Tower of War, Yongling's heart skipped a beat. The Crimson Flame Demons that were slightly thinner and had purple flames burning on their bodies gathered into groups, shouting as they threw balls of abyssal flames toward the War Wizard Pagoda. Even though the War Wizard Pagoda used magic-resistant stone and had defensive spell formations carved on the body of the pagoda, as well as an energy shield outside the pagoda, but no matter how many defensive measures they had, they would not be able to withstand the devastation of a violent battle. Under the continuous attacks of the abyssal demons, the war wizard towers at the outer perimeter were toppled and groups of wizard beasts were slaughtered. The entire battlefield was a sea of blood. Everywhere, one could see the horrifying scene of blood flowing all over the ground and corpses in a mess. Every time a war wizard tower fell, the wizards of the Arden family would have to flee in panic. They needed to escape from the ruins to the nearby War Wizard Pagoda, or simply escape to the wizard tower at the back. This short distance of less than 100 meters was the difference between life and death. Seeing the figures of the wizards, the abyssal demons that had been ravaged by the War Wizard Pagoda immediately teleported over without hesitation. Thump, thump, thump. A series of strange sounds unique to the precise teleportation spell could be heard. The wizards that had escaped from the ruins were instantly covered by tall and ferocious bodies. Under the sharp claws and whistling sawtooth swords, the level 1 and level 2 human wizards had no way to escape. They all died on the spot. Chapter 1372. As pure creatures of the abyss, demons were repelled by almost all the prime material planes. The evil, chaos, and filth they represented were no less toxic to all beings of the prime material plane and could even corrode the souls of beings of the prime material plane. Souls killed or devoured by demons, even if they were worshippers of the gods, would not be able to remain in the upper planes. They would fall into the abyssal world along with other filthy souls, where they would be tormented by the harsh environment. They charged into the Magus world wave after wave, unafraid of death, all for the chance to harvest the souls of beings of the prime material plane. The more they killed, the more souls they corrupted, and the greater the feedback they would receive from the abyssal will when they returned to the abyssal world. In other planes, it was extremely difficult to advance a rank. One had to continuously temper their body and mind, accumulate energy, and gamble with the illusory will of the plane. However, the advancement of abyssal demons was abnormally simple and quick. As long as they could constantly kill and plunder soul energy, they would be able to rise endlessly. Hence, if they were lucky enough, an abyssal demon could evolve from the most basic abyssal larva to a greater demon of rank 4 in just 2 or 3 years. With such a rapid growth time and such a simple and direct path to advancement, the abyssals didn't need to think about anything or research anything. Instead, they only needed to focus on killing and swallowing. It had to be said that abyssal demons were extremely terrifying slaughterers compared to most beings of the other planes. With the death of a large number of demons on the battlefield, their flesh and corpses turned into black water that continuously contaminated and polluted the land. Imperceptibly, the area around the spatial rift had already completed its initial demonization process. As a result, the abyssal aura that seeped out from the rift repelled the laws of the Magus world even further away, causing the battlefield to become more and more like the barren and cruel abyssal world. In such a battlefield, the human magi enjoyed less and less support from the plane, while the abyssal demons, who were invaders, suffered less and less pressure from the plane. With this, the difference in strength between the two sides grew greater and greater. After a long period of charging, the magic cannons on the Viscero airship were ready once more. As a thick red light streaked across the sky, the energy beam once again shot toward the demon lord who ruled this battlefield. Unfortunately, this powerful attack was easily dodged by Finus with a simple teleportation. The energy beam brushed past, melting a bottomless hole in the pitch-black ground. Just by relying on his powerful regenerative ability, Demon Lord Finus had already begun to repair the 1-meter diameter hole in his chest. At the same time, its injuries changed from heavy injury to light injury. If it was given a little more time, perhaps even the last bit of injury would disappear. At that time, Finus would once again be a terrifying demon with astonishing combat strength. The powerful regenerative abilities of demonic creatures were indeed incomparable to those of existential planes. The spatial rift was still swallowing all kinds of demons. Among them were chattering imps, horned demons, fire throwers, as well as Vlo demons, berserker demons, succubi, crimson flame demons, and other intermediate demons. These fellows, who would usually kill and devour each other when they met, had now become allies on the battlefield under the suppression of the demon Lord Finus. Even though they still disliked each other, a large-scale internal massacre did not happen. They gathered together according to their tribes and natures, and their ranks gradually became thicker. Most of the abyssal demons charged toward the war wizard pagoda in the distance, without hesitation under Finus's kicks and roars. As for the remaining fellows, they could not suppress their irritable and ecstatic emotions. They sniffed the unique scent of the main substance plane and followed the scent of delicious flesh and blood to the periphery. They could not wait to explore this beautiful world that was filled with the fragrance of food. If these abyssal demons were allowed to infiltrate the human society, even a 1- or 2-year-old fellows would be able to wreak havoc and make life difficult for the people. After all, the difference in strength between ordinary humans and the abyssal demons was too great. Furthermore, one side was a ferocious demon that crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, while the other side was a barefooted farmer that picked up a knife and fork. Even if the latter's numbers were 100 or 1,000 times greater, they would not be able to change the tragic fate of being hunted and devoured. Even a group of rabbits armed to the teeth would not be able to contend against lions and tigers. Seeing that the situation was being turned around by the abyssal demons, Captain Locke on the Viscero warship waved his hand, and a magical weapon group of 700 people descended from the floating ship to the ground. They then formed into a tight battle formation and advanced toward the front of the battlefield. The magical weapon group had a total of 700 people, including 500 PG, 52 combat magical machines, and 200 no-mechanical warlocks. They were not like wizard beasts that needed to engage in close combat with the abyssal demons. As a group of long-range firepower from the moment they stepped onto the battlefield, their Mark II magic cannons, magic rapid-fire cannons, quadrupole magical ray guns, and honeycomb no-missiles started firing continuously. The ferocious firepower and powerful long-range firepower turned every abyssal demon that entered their attack range into a sieve, exploding into pieces of flesh and blood. In an instant, the cannons rumbled, and the rays of light rained down, suppressing the abyssal demons that had just gained a slight advantage. When a 4-meter-tall berserker saw the magical weapon group's arrogance, Its eyes turned bloodshot as it charged forward. As it charged, it raised its hand and pointed at the sky above the magical weapon group. In the next second, a black-red cloud of fire rumbled, and meteors descended from the sky one after another. Meteor Shower. It was a simple Tier 3 fire-type spell, although its attack power was not as strong as a Tier 3 fire shaman. It was more than enough to disrupt the enemy's formation and attack. If it encountered an enemy with low magic resistance, this Tier 3 spell would probably be enough to annihilate half of them. Facing the powerful Abyssal Demon's counterattack, the magical weapon group instantly displayed superb combat skills. The few metal magical weapons at the front of the battle sheathed their long-range weapons and pulled out metal axes or blades from their backs, charging at the berserker. The metal magical weapons at the back raised their cannons and fired a concentrated barrage, blasting the meteors in the air one after another. Even the cloud of fire in the sky was blasted into pieces by the gnome missiles, losing the ability to condense meteors. The magical weapons in the middle of the battle ignored the berserkers' attacks and continued to advance, braving the rain of fire that rained down from the sky. Before the berserker could even engage the metal magical weapon, its body was already covered in wounds and blood. In this sudden battle, although it smashed a magic machine into pieces with its powerful force, causing sparks to fly, it was also overturned by the magic machine warriors that swarmed it. Its head was chopped off, and its limbs were chopped off. When the Alden family's wizards saw this scene, they were shocked, and their imagination began to run wild. One had to know that a Tier 3 Hezru was a dual cultivator of magic and martial arts, possessing instantaneous spell-like spells and powerful physical strength. Even a Tier 4 Hezru could fight for a few rounds with a Tier 4 wizard. Logically speaking, such a powerful evil demon was not something that low-level creatures could kill simply by relying on numbers. However, on the battlefield before them, this Tier 3 berserker was defeated by a group of metal magical weapons, whose average level was only Tier 2. And this group of metal magical weapons relied on their extremely fierce long-range firepower. If the target of the battle was changed, it would be a Tier 3 wizard fighting against this magical weapon group. How long could this Tier 3 wizard last, and how many metal magical weapons could he destroy before he died? After a simple calculation, all the wizards of the Alden family could not help but break out in a cold sweat, their hearts beating wildly. 0. If both sides fought to the death, the Tier 3 wizard might not even be able to destroy a single metal magical weapon before the magical weapon group broke through his defense and turned him into a sieve. Of course, if the Tier 3 wizard could fight while retreating, find an opportunity to release a high-grade spell, then run away and sneak back to find an opportunity to release a high-grade wizard, with this method, it was very possible to slowly wear down this magical weapon group without a high-grade wizard. However, this assumption was based on the fact that the wizards on one side could recover quickly, and the magical weapon group did not have any follow-up methods. Once the gigantic airship above their heads entered the battlefield, the so-called wretched sneak attack style would become a joke. Everyone had seen the power of the giant magic cannons. The demon lords could dodge them easily, but it did not mean that human wizards could do the same. Therefore, if a war broke out between the Crimson family and the Alden family, even if the Crimson family did not send a single high-grade wizard, they could still defeat the Alden family with a combination of the giant ship and metal magical weapons. The victory would definitely belong to the Crimson family. The only difference would be the number of metal magical weapons lost. The death of the berserker seemed to have opened the curtains. In the next 15 minutes, another 4 high-level demons died under the dense cannon fire. This time, let alone the human wizards, even the demon Lord Finus could not help but look over. Finus, who had led his demon subordinates to attack and pillage more than a dozen planes, could not help but be surprised. It was the first time he saw a plane that used metal magical weapons as the main force on a large scale. Could it be that his eyes were playing tricks on him and he wanted the wrong plane? This is not the Sorcerer World. Chapter 1373. a group of high-grade serpent demons stepped out of the spatial rift. Each of them had a thick snake tail behind them, and 4 sturdy arms stretched out from both sides of their upright upper torsos. Their bodies were covered in dense, dark green scales, and a scarlet snake tongue stuck out from their mouths, full of sharp teeth. Their blood-red, vertical pupils flickered with a cold glint as they coldly scanned the surroundings. The appearance of this group of high-grade serpent demons deeply intimidated all the demons in the surroundings. The low-grade demons all hid to the sides, leaving the flattest and most spacious area in the center of the battlefield for the high-grade serpent demons. However, this was not the end. As the high-grade serpent demons separated to the left and right, an exceptionally bewitching 6-armed serpent demon appeared in front of everyone. This was a female grade 4 6-armed serpent demon. Her upper body was more than 4 meters tall, and she looked like a magnified version of a beautiful human. She had a sharp and slender oval face, snow-white and translucent facial skin, charming and moving apricot blossom eyes, and a head of strange dark brown whip hair that was fluttering without any wind. The only pity was that the upper body of the female, 6-armed demonic snake, the red mantis fruit, was covered with a layer of indigo-colored sharp tooth scales. These scales were densely packed, making it impossible for people to peep at the endless scenery behind. Every time this female, 6-armed serpent demon swayed her 10-meter-long tail and swayed forward, the 2 bulging bulges on her chest would tremble with her every move. It was quite eye-catching. Moreover, the numerous beautifully carved metal bracelets on her arm would jingle when they collided with each other, producing a melodious metallic clanking sound. Some sorcerer apprentices with shallow knowledge often couldn't distinguish between serpent demons and medusas, but there was nothing wrong with this. This was because medusas and serpent demons originally had a bloodline that could not be severed. As soon as the abyssal demons had the opportunity, they would wildly invade the major material planes. Therefore, they left behind descendants with demonic bloodlines in many planes. For example, the demonic humans formed by the union of demons and humans were also known as demonic descendants. They had the body and appearance of humans, and when they grew up, they were generally sturdy and had extraordinary strength. Moreover, some fellows with rich bloodlines would even have eye-catching demonic patterns on their bodies, allowing them to borrow some of the racial talents of their blood relatives. There was also a small number of demonkin among the sorcerers of the sorcerer world. Their fathers were often high-grade sorcerers, while their mothers were lowly succubi or other female demons. Their overly mixed bloodlines meant that most of them did not have a bright future. A demonkin that could manifest Mageweth in its infancy could only grow to the maximum of Tier 3. There had never been a rank 4 demonkin sorcerer in history. The reason for this was nothing more than the plane's consciousness aversion and suppression. The group of high-tier Naga demons surrounded the Tier 4 6-armed Naga like stars surrounding the moon as they swaggered into the battlefield. It must be known that among the abyssal demons, the 6-armed Naga was mainly engaged in strategizing and tactical planning. They were also one of the few demonic creatures that were good at thinking and planning. Of course, due to the chaotic and disorderly nature of the abyssal demons, any good battle plan given to them would only turn into a chaotic melee. Moreover, the demons were obviously experienced in melee battles. Therefore, most of the time, in order to ensure that their plans could be carried out smoothly, the 6-armed Naga could only use their sharp and numerous blades to chop their enemies into countless pieces. This level 4 6-armed Naga clearly had a status that was on par with the demon Lord Finus. As soon as she stepped into the battlefield, she instantly used her talent to detect the core that would affect the outcome of the entire battle. She led over 20 Naga demons under her and drove a group of low-level and mid-level demons toward the magical weapons army. After they attracted the firepower of the magical weapons and the war wizard's pagoda, the group of terrifying Naga demons immediately activated Bladestorm and used the precise teleportation spell to break into the center of the magical weapons army, instantly creating a storm of blood. Blade Storm was the terrifying signature move of the six-armed Naga demons. They could use magical energy to condense a large number of magical weapons around them, then spin them crazily around their bodies. Every time the Naga demons activated Blade Storm, it was also the moment they broke into the enemy's encirclement. They held the long and narrow sabers in their slender and strong arms, together with the blade storm that lingered outside their bodies. Every snake demon could instantly turn into the most horrifying cylindrical saber array. Even though they were heavily surrounded by the enemy, the Naga demons were still elegant, their movements gorgeous and smooth, as if they were taking a stroll in the center of the battlefield. Where the blades and swords pointed, they were invincible, leaving behind only scattered corpses that were cut into pieces. If a Naga demon were to activate Blade Storm and charge into the group of wizard beasts, the magnificent scene would be truly spectacular. Wherever the Blade Storm swept, blood splattered and limbs flew everywhere. Ferocious and terrifying wizard beasts were decapitated by the rolling blades, tragically killed by 1,000 cuts. Stepping onto the battlefield was like stepping into a horrifying slaughterhouse, with heads and body parts flying everywhere as far as the eye could see. However, when the group of Naga demons charged into the midst of the magical mechanical battle group, they were immediately like a stuck tank, no longer having the invincible courage they had before. Be it the Blade Storm or the long and narrow blades. When they slashed the bodies of the metal magical mechanical battle group, dazzling sparks would fly, leaving deep scratches on the magical mechanical battle group's golden, all-metal shell. The powerful recoil also made the Naga demons' wrists sore, and the blades in their hands trembled and buzzed incessantly. But they couldn't cut it. While the Naga demons were slightly stunned, the counterattack from the magical mechanical battle group instantly made them taste the pain of kicking an iron plate. Not afraid of friendly fire or stray bullets, the dense magical rays and goblin missiles instantly drowned the bodies of the Naga demons. The terrifying elemental power and the exploding metal bullets instantly turned the Naga demons into sieves. Although the Naga demons were a type of high-level demon, possessing unparalleled combat skills and the ability to attack like a storm, their slender and soft body made them a type of agile warrior. However, their slender and soft bodies made them a type of agile warrior, and the indigo scales on their bodies were mainly thin and fine. Such scales were unparalleled against light weapons, such as daggers and swords. Coupled with their nimble bodies, they could dodge and negate most of the close-range damage. However, the only weakness was that their defense was not strong enough. Defend? Defend? Strength? No. Enough. If their enemies were weak like the wizard beasts, charging into the crowd and unleashing the Blade Storm would naturally be the most effective method of attack. However, if their attacks were thwarted and they could not hit their enemies, then charging into the crowd would be akin to seeking death. After the storm of bullets, the 7-grade 2 Naga demons hissed as their bodies turned into beehives. They collapsed on the battlefield, never to get up again. However, the 5-grade 3 4-armed Naga demons and the grade 4 6-armed Naga demon were still as ferocious as ever. As high-level demons, their ferocious attacks had clearly exceeded the limits of the defense of the magical machinery. 6 miniature blade storms appeared within the magical machinery group. Everywhere they passed, the PG-52 battle magical machinery seemed to be disassembled, turning into countless metal parts and construct shards that flew in all directions. Sparks could still be seen in the shards that flew in the air. High-level demons were indeed high-level demons. When they wanted to be ruthless, they could even cut through the metal magical machinery that was 10 times harder and more resistant to magic than ordinary steel. In just a single exchange, the team of Naga demons had lost 7 low-level members, while the magical machinery group had lost more than 30 members. As if sensing the threat of the group of Naga demons, the War Wizard's pagoda changed its direction. Bolts of lightning descended from the sky and struck the terrifying Naga demons. The Naga demon, on the other hand, twisted its body slightly and disappeared after hearing the shout of the 6-armed Naga demon, dodging the many eye-catching wizard spells. On the other hand, the six-armed Naga didn't care about the lightning strikes at all. It propped up a translucent elemental light barrier around its body and continued to chase after the scattered metal magical equipment without caring about anything else. Wherever the six strange, long, and shiny battle blades passed, they easily dismembered the battle magical machinery like a butcher dismembering a cow. There were almost no magical machinery that could stop her from roaming around the battlefield as if she was taking a stroll. As for the attacks from the surrounding magical machinery, they were all blocked by the light barrier or the scales. Occasionally, the attacks that managed to penetrate the defenses could only cause insignificant injuries. From this, one could see just how terrifying a Tier 4 demon was. This Naga demon is too arrogant. Prepare the giant magic cannons. Let's teach her a lesson. Captain Locke, who was overseeing the Viscero warship, had a furious look on his face as he loudly issued the battle order. Under his command, the giant magic cannons at the front of the floating warship started charging again. The terrifying whistling sound of energy as it gathered would make anyone tremble in fear. The six-armed Naga demon, who was in the midst of battle, had sensed the source of danger ahead of time. When a muzzle of the giant magic cannons suddenly lit up and a thick black beam of light shot toward her body, the six-armed Naga demon pointed her six long, narrow battle blades forward. Her entire body, supported by her long snake tail, drew a snow-white line in the air as she eerily thrust forward 100 meters. And it was this 100-meter dash that allowed her to successfully dodge the energy beam's bombardment. She also conveniently slashed the 11 battle magic machines in her way into smithereens. The battlefield was deathly silent for a moment. Chapter 1374. The Blazing Flame Monarch. Within a brightly lit secret spell room, Grimm was carefully processing the Star Beast's corpse. Under the AI chip's instructions, Grimm would slice off a portion of the Star Beast's corpse from time to time and toss it into his mouth, swallowing it in large mouthfuls. The flesh that flowed with purple blood was extremely fishy and unbearable. Even Grimm's scalpel, which had been enchanted with many spells, found it difficult to slice it. The stomach of a regular human would not be able to digest the Star Beast's flesh, which contained a strong elemental toxin. The moment the flesh entered one's mouth, the devourer would probably be infected and turn into a monster on the spot. Grimm's stomach was now different from a regular human's. The walls of his stomach were tough and dense, filled with golden flames that reached a temperature of several thousand degrees. The moment the Star Beast's flesh entered his stomach, it was enveloped by the golden flames and instantly vaporized into magic particles with different elemental properties. However, the special life factors in the flesh were directly absorbed by the walls of his stomach and transported to a specific region in his body through specially constructed tubes. There, the fragments of the Star Beast's bloodline that Grimm had absorbed and analyzed were slowly circulating. The newly absorbed life factors fused with the gene fragments, slowly making up for the deficiencies. Of course, most of the absorbed Star Beast bloodline had overlapped with the genes of the previous bloodline. It could only strengthen the genes indirectly, but it could not make up for the deficiencies. Only after fusing with a few fragments would there be a slight change in the growth of the bloodline's genetic chain. 8,965%. Relying on the AI chip's meticulous observation and senses, Grimm was able to detect the minute changes after the decimal point. It was like he was playing a genetic jigsaw puzzle. The entire genetic map was made up of millions of extremely minute gene fragments. More than 98% of the Star Beast's bloodline in Grimm's body had been pieced together. The remaining bit seemed insignificant, but it was not an easy task to complete. Other Magi did not have the assistance of the AI chip, and they could only rely on their intuition and luck to test things out. If they were right, they would advance a step. If they were wrong, all their previous efforts would go to waste, and they would have to start all over again. Therefore, although there were many strong sorcerers in the field of bloodline research, they were still ignorant and primitive. Moreover, most high-ranked magi researched on their own and would never share or exchange the results of their research with others. The result of this was that the witchcraft system regarding bloodline research was fragmented and had many barriers. It was impossible to form a stable bloodline family. Therefore, most of the bloodline families that appeared in the mega system were short-lived. Following the departure or death of the strongest, the family's power would continue to decline and weaken. Of course, this might be the intention of the great sorcerers. This was to prevent a certain bloodline family from becoming too powerful and dominating the sorcerer world for too long. This also gave other elemental magi or bloodline families the opportunity to display their strength and splendor. Of course, this was only Grimm's conjecture. There was no actual evidence to support this view. However, Grimm did not care what those great wizards thought. He only wanted to make up for the deficiency of his astral beast bloodline as soon as possible so that this long-awaited bloodline power could truly shine. 1,365%. Very soon, as Grimm swallowed in large gulps, the completion rate of the astral beast bloodline from the AI chip slowly increased. A rank 3 astral beast might not be enough to complete the bloodline, but it was more than enough to make up for the 3% he was lacking. Finally, with a crisp beep from the AI chip, the light blue progress bar of the astral beast bloodline in the depths of Grimm's mind reached 100%. In the next second, Grimm suddenly shuddered, and his entire body began to tremble violently like a sieve. It was as if a spatial singularity had suddenly opened in the depths of his mind, and his consciousness and some illusory laws of the world were temporarily coupled together. Following that, an overwhelming amount of experience and strange realizations engulfed his consciousness like a huge wave. Beep. Detected a foreign data stream. Initial estimation is that of a foreign astral beast world inheritance. Requesting host instructions on whether to accept. 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 Accept immediately. Grimm seemed to be roaring as he commanded the AI chip. It had to be known that most astral beasts would receive the inheritance of a world when they were young. With such a gradual process, they would naturally be able to accept it smoothly. Moreover, most astral beasts were terrifying creatures with thick skin and flesh, and their spiritual force was 100 times stronger than Grimm's human consciousness. Hence, it was not that painful for them to receive the inheritance. However, Grimm obviously lacked the buffer between rank 1 and rank 3. He immediately accepted the transformation of a rank 4 astral beast inheritance with his human consciousness. In truth, if not for the AI chip bearing the brunt of the impact of the inheritance, he would have become the first fool in the history of magi to have his consciousness destroyed by the transformation of a bloodline inheritance. Even so, just the aftermath of the transformation caused Grimm to cry out loudly. His eyes, ears, nose, and every pore on his body were spurting out purplish-black blood. The blood was thick, viscous, and endless. One could not help but wonder how Grimm's 2-meter-tall human body could contain such a large amount of blood. It was not just the blood that spurted out. Along with the black blood, there was also a large amount of extremely pure flame energy. Crimson flames surged out from Grimm's body, vaporizing everything around him. Even the obsidian floor that was protected by the spell formation was burnt red. As for Grimm's light robe, it turned to ashes the moment the flames erupted. Grimm yelled loudly, enduring the immense pain from his genes as he waited for the AI chip to analyze the results. The contents of the astral beast inheritance were too vast and messy. Even a real astral beast would need a large amount of energy and a long time to digest and absorb the inheritance. Grimm did not have the time to sleep for more than 10 years to digest and absorb the knowledge, inheritance, and comprehension. Hence, he could only rely on the AI chip's powerful data storage and sorting functions to search for the most convenient and concise bloodline inheritance, like finding a needle in a haystack. Devouring devilfish. It had to be said that the astral beast Grimm had chosen for himself was a rare species. It was called the devouring devilfish, and it had a strange stomach that could devour all living creatures in energy. As long as it completely swallowed them, any living creature could only obediently turn into chaotic energy and become a part of its body. The reason why he had accepted the inheritance of the devouring devilfish was probably related to the fish-like astral beast that Mary had given him. After all, Grimm's astral beast bloodline could grow so quickly because of the heart of the ice dragon and the fish-like astral beast. They had stimulated the power of Grimm's bloodline, allowing him to grow so quickly. Lying silently in the crimson lava pool, Grimm was undergoing an earth-shattering transformation both inside and outside of his body. The minute changes inside were unknown, but one could see that layers of crystal-like transparent scales had appeared on his dark red skin. These scales covered almost every part of Grimm's body, leaving only a few small gaps in his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Following Grimm's coarse and heavy breathing, a thin stream of transparent flames spurted out from his mouth and nose, condensing into flashing golden flames of laws on the surface of his body. It was obvious that even the transformation of the astral beast bloodline had not been able to completely suppress Grimm's innate talent for fire. In comparison, after being squeezed by the power of the bloodline, the original flames had mostly dissipated. However, the remaining flames had condensed into the true inextinguishable flames that Grimm had been looking forward to for a long time, with the laws of fire as the core. From now on, the inextinguishable flames were one of Grimm's spells, and also a law of fire that he had fused with the depths of his soul. From then on, the inextinguishable flame became a part of his instincts, and no one could separate it from his soul anymore. While Grimm's consciousness was in a daze, the AI chip's new prompt sounded in his mind. Beep. The first astral beast bloodline has been completed. Host has completed the first astral beast bloodline inheritance. Obtain the following abilities. Devilfish transformation. Host can transform into a devouring devilfish, possessing its full battle prowess and bloodline specialties. Berserk devouring. Able to devour a creature that is no larger than twice the size of the host and convert it into chaotic energy for the host's use. This effect can only be used once per day. Note: enemies that are twice the size of the host cannot be devoured. Devouring magic. One of the specialties of the bloodline. Able to completely devour a spell that is not more than 6,000 degrees of energy and convert it into chaotic energy to counterattack. This effect can only be used 3 times per day. After transforming into a devilfish, the host's strength will be affected by the host's vitality and power. Every 10 points of spiritual force can support the bloodline transformation for 2 minutes. If the spiritual force falls below 10 points, the bloodline transformation will be canceled. Looking at the rows and rows of densely packed data and parameters, Grimm was both shocked and delighted. Finally, his bloodline transformation that had been going on for 200 years had come to an end. He could now use it on the battlefield. On the other hand, the power and strangeness of the astral beast bloodline left him in awe. Chapter 1375. Following the arrival of the demon wave, the flames of war and the smoke of gunpowder never dissipated. Terrifying news of exotic beast invasions or Black Forest riots could be heard almost everywhere on the Magus continent. No matter which one it would bring a terrifying disaster and an incomparable impact to the local mortal world. From time to time, there would be news of a region suffering heavy casualties due to the invasion of unknown exotic beasts, or a former human kingdom being destroyed due to the outbreak of plague or the invasion of exotic beasts. The more such news was heard, the more panic the citizens would feel. They would bring their wives and children, catch up with the few remaining livestock, or hide deep in the mountains, or follow the vast crowds of people to the few regions that were considered safe so far. Among them, the Eloise and Hayworth regions under the Crimson family's rule were undoubtedly the safest islands. The citizens living in these two regions had reason to feel blessed for their happiness. Every time they saw the astonishing number of giant floating airships in the sky, every time they passed by the border checkpoints and saw the rows of tall and mighty metal magic machines, they would feel a sense of security from the bottom of their hearts. Because the Crimson family had done a lot of preparation work, they had almost all the hidden dangers in these two regions monitored in advance. Thus, during the first wave of the Demon Wave, all the exotic beasts that had slipped into the Crimson territory were eliminated by the family's armed forces before they could do anything. The direct result of this was that in the 31 regions of the Central Continent, other regions had more or less serious incidents of exotic beast invasions. However, only the two regions ruled by the Crimson family did not even have the shadow of a single magical beast, not to mention the invasion of exotic beasts. Even the Black Forest adjacent to the Eloise region was surrounded by the giant floating airships that had just gathered a group of wild beasts and low-tier magical beasts before they could even rush out of the forest. Once the Crimson Fleet arrived, they did not say a word and directly dropped the Magic Dragon No. 1 that they had carried. Following the Magic Dragon No. 1 was a magic machine group of 2,000 people. They were no longer the heavy and clumsy old machines that spat out large amounts of white steam. Instead, they were the PG-52 combat magic machines that had been repeatedly improved and strengthened by dozens of generations of gnomes. In terms of overall performance, a PG-52 combat machine's basic combat strength was comparable to a Grade 2 wizard. If one were to consider the fearlessness and obedience of the magic machinery, the price-performance ratio of the magic machinery would be far above that of a Tier 2 wizard. However, the power of magic machinery could not be infinitely amplified. Basically, the PG-52 battle magic machinery was already at the peak of magical battle machinery. This meant that Tier 2 was the limit of mass-produced magic equipment. If he wanted to increase the power of the magic machinery, he would have to use more expensive magic alloys and rare metals. Due to the limitation of resources and materials, it was obvious that the demonic equipment could not expand indefinitely. However, the appearance of the Golem Dragon had earned some face for the Magical Equipment Guild. Thanks to the outstanding performance of the Devil Dragon No. 1, the Goblin Magic Machinery finally had a good product in the high level. Therefore, when the Devil Dragon No. 1's 100-meter-tall metal body appeared in the Black Forest, it created a wide path that was dozens of meters wide in the depths of the forest. The group of beasts that had just gathered together dispersed immediately. The Devil Dragon No. 1, with its huge metal body, was a super magic equipment that could fight against a Tier 4 wizard. Although it could not move freely and had many defensive blind spots, it was no longer a problem with the help of the 2,000 combat magic machines behind it. The beast horde that had just gathered was like a flock of frightened lambs running around in the depths of the forest. The Devil Dragon No. 1 and the Magic Machine Group behind it were wantonly chasing and slaughtering them. The monsters that had been provoked by the magic wave also formed groups of 3 to 5 and fearlessly charged at the Magic Machine Group. Unfortunately, their valiance and violence were all crushed in front of the indestructible body of the combat magic machinery. In the face of the unstoppable metal tide, individual bravery and bravery were of no use. Although a few powerful monster lords could also cause some small waves, they would be smashed into pieces in the blink of an eye like a huge wave crashing into a reef, disappearing without a trace. Poison Twilight Lizardmen, Heart Splitters, Gnolls, with spikes, black-scale lizardmen, wind-winged birds, spider apes, forest trolls, blue trance, mud monsters, armored grizzly bears, skull-crusher ogres, earth crystal men, hundred-eyed ghosts, stone singers, giant winged snake dragons. In truth, the dark forest of the sorcerer world was like a treasure trove of monsters. There were all kinds of monsters of all shapes and sizes, and their numbers were terrifying. Each of the monster leaders was a terrifying guy on their own. But when they encountered an organized magic legion, they were nothing more than small shrimps that could not cause any trouble. In the face of the Magic Dragon No. 1 that could easily take down a city, the Magic Machine Group that did not hesitate to fire their cannons and the floating airship that controlled the entire situation from the sky. After a few troublesome monster leaders were killed on the spot by the magic cannons, the rest of them scattered like birds and beasts, fleeing into the depths of the forest without looking back and disappearing without a trace. In an instant, no traces of monsters could be found within 3,000 miles of the dark forest in the northeastern corner of the Alovis region. After chasing the monsters further away, the Magic Machine Group did not continue their pursuit and chose to retreat into the family. However, the Crimson Fleet had left some hidden surveillance spell formations within the 3,000-mile boundary. This way, any subsequent actions of the monsters would not be able to escape the eyes of the Crimson family. The 3,000-mile buffer zone was enough for the Crimson family to survive the magic wave. It had to be known that it was not easy for the leaders of the magical creatures to organize a large-scale magic wave. They did not have the concept of logistics and organization. With their power as a lord, they could barely suppress the magic wave for 2 to 3 days. Gathering the magic beasts, forcing them to move towards human settlements, such complicated operations could be done once in a while. However, once the target was thousands of miles away, suppressing the agitation of the magic beasts and allowing them to successfully reach the location of the attack became an impossible task. No high-rank magic beast was willing to endure 3 to 5 days of hunger to cross 3,000 miles and attack a human town. After all, there was prey everywhere, and they could eat it to fill their stomachs. Once the high-ranked magic beasts began to hunt as they pleased, the wild beasts and vicious birds that they had captured would scatter in all directions, and it would be difficult to control them. Hence, to a certain extent, the 3,000-mile buffer zone was an insurmountable barrier for the magic wave. Of course, the Crimson family's method of suppressing the magic beasts was not something that any Magus family could learn. They wanted to find the location of the magic beasts in the dark forest, where danger lurked everywhere, and then send out the elites of the family to disperse the core forces in one go, taking advantage of the situation to drive them to a safe distance away. To accomplish this, they needed an elite team that could fight, one that was not restricted by the terrain and environment. Among most Magus families, only a few rank 4 Magus troops could barely reach this standard. The rest were either not strong enough, or they lacked flying mounts that could move at high speeds in the dark forest. If they were unable to disperse the magic beasts in a thunderous manner, then in the dark and serene dark forest, a bloody and brutal battle would ensue. This was definitely not good news for the Magus troops that were deep in the enemy's territory. Big families had abundant resources and financial resources, and could control multiple sorcerer troops with strange combat abilities at the same time. However, most small to medium-sized Magus families only had one Magus troop that they had painstakingly raised. If the main force of such a family were to fall in the dark forest, the whole family would not be able to recover and would be reduced to a third-rate faction. Hence, without complete confidence, no Magus family would dare to send out their precious forces to attack the magic beasts. They prefer to defend the wizard tower and use the war wizard's pagoda and wizard beasts to defend against the attacks of the magic beasts. With the abilities of the magical beast leaders, it was difficult for them to break through an official wizard's pagoda. Hence, the safety of the Magi would be guaranteed, and the Magus troops would not face the risk of being completely wiped out. However, the huge disaster that the magic beasts could bring to the family's territory was unavoidable. However, in the eyes of the Magi, the losses of official Magi and Magus troops were unacceptable. As for the ordinary people in the family's territory, their losses were just numbers on the books to the Magi. Even though the death of a large number of people would be a headache for the Magi, they would never use their Magi's lives to protect these so-called assets. The loss of assets could be slowly recovered, but the loss of the family's precious Magi resources was absolutely unacceptable. It was this conservative and short-sighted style of the Magi that made the magic beasts so aggressive and dangerous, bringing continuous unrest and deep suffering to the entire Magus continent. Compared to the central part of the continent, where everyone did things their own way, The three major Magi organizations displayed a high degree of organization and discipline. The Silver Alliance was rich and overbearing. In order to deal with the magic beasts, they began to shrink the population in their territory, temporarily moving the ordinary people inland, far away from the space cracks and the dark forest. The towns and fortresses at the borders were filled with a large number of metal constructs and puppet creations. Chapter 1376. Compared to the wealth of the Silver Alliance, the Northern Witches relied on individual bravery to resist the wave of demons. It was really unexpected that the group of people with the most direct combat style, the toughest fighting style, and the fiercest fighting style in the entire Wizard continent were actually a group of witches. In the face of this huge disaster, the Northern Witches showed courage and boldness that far exceeded that of the male witches. They did not stay in their family territory, but walked out of the Wizard's pagoda, gathered the mortal army in the territory, and poured into several strongholds adjacent to the Black Forest. Under the motion of the Witch Council, many witch tribes that were not threatened by the wave of beasts also sent a large number of witches and wizard beast troops to the border area for support. They cooperated sincerely, united as one, and pulled up a thick and dense defense network at the edge of the Black Forest. In this battle between witches, humans, and the wave of beasts, the witches of various factions put aside their previous hatred and fully displayed their unique fighting methods. The main force of the war was naturally the undead army sent by the Witch of Death. Although this undead army was not as large and varied as the undead army under the Lich, the level of elite should not be underestimated. Especially the corpse pythons, evil sand spirits, skeletal claws, and floating spirits, who served as the core of the main force. Almost all of them were good at group battles and chaotic battles. Coupled with their unique poisonous aura of the dead, it was even easier to deal with the forest beasts and ferocious demons of flesh and blood. And with their sacrifice, the impact of the wave of beasts was not so fierce. In this way, even a mortal army and the wizard beast troops could hold the front line and not be overwhelmed by the swarm of beasts. The Cold Winter Witches also took the opportunity to create a large-scale snowstorm over the wave of beasts. Although the number of beasts and demons directly killed was not too many, it caused countless troubles and pain to the attacks of the beasts. And the Dark Witches brought their shadow army. They may not be conspicuous during the day, but at night, the entire battlefield would become the domain of the shadow army. Groups of terrible shadow creatures were active in every inch of space on the battlefield, using various strange and insidious methods to kill groups of beasts and birds that lacked the protection of extraordinary power. The Witch of Pain set up the curse altar and used a series of powerful and strange curses to turn the active monster leaders into soft-footed crabs. And every time this happened, it was also the time when the Pale Witch sent a powerful companion spirit to attack the monster lords together with the Dark Witch. As for the Witches of Deceit and Hypocrisy, they were responsible for misleading and luring the beast tide, causing them to be defeated in all kinds of illusions. In this war against the beast tide, the Witches of Destiny did not even need to step onto the battlefield. The greatest value of their existence was to predict where the next beast horde would appear, as well as the target of the attack and its possible scale. The border between the Northern Witch Territory and the Black Forest was long and rugged. Without the guidance of the Fate Witches, even if the Northern Witches came out in full force, it would be impossible to defend the line of defense so well. Once any of the borders were breached, what awaited the people of the North was a brutal massacre. Ordinary people did not have the slightest ability to fight back against the beast tide. Once the beast tide rushed into the human settlement, the terrible consequences would make anyone break out in cold sweat and shudder. The Crimson family had an enclave in the White Tower area in the north. Although it belonged to the Fate Witches in name, the actual control was in the hands of the Crimson Magnate, led by Merrill. In order to defend this enclave, the Crimson family stationed 2 giant floating ships, more than 700 magical troops, and the Emerald Dragon Squad, led by the Emerald Dragon Aratina. Seriously speaking, It was simply overkill for such a powerful and elite combat team to defend a territory with an area of less than 3,000 square kilometers. Therefore, the moment the beast tide in the depths of the Black Forest east of the White Tower showed signs of gathering, they were directly dispersed by the Crimson Warship. Since then, the high-grade monster lords in the surrounding Black Forest were purposefully and systematically cleared out by Merrill and the others. Without their guidance, the beast tide would not be able to gather again due to the lack of necessary cores. As for the scattered beasts and monsters that rushed out of the Black Forest, they became the training targets of the low-grade magi and apprentices. Compared to the tension and killing in the north, the area around the White Tower was a rare piece of pure land. As if sensing the decisive role of the giant floating ships in a large-scale battle, the higher-ups of the Witch of Death, Thuna, and the Witch of Darkness, Circe, took the initiative to contact Merrill in the White Tower. After a round of bargaining, the Crimson family sent out 2 giant floating ships and more than 400 magical troops in the name of conscription. They were mainly responsible for transporting the Northern Witches' wizard beast troops and various supplies, materials, and resources. They did not actually participate in the battle in the north. Even so, the addition of these 2 aerial behemoths caused the entire North's battle situation to change abruptly. They had originally been on the defensive, but now they were taking the initiative to attack. One by one, the gathering points of the Demon Tide were destroyed by the Northern Witches' fierce attacks. The monster lords were assassinated in their nests, and the land returned to peace with the arrival of the giant floating ships. It had to be said that the giant floating ships built by the Crimson family were like heavy war fortresses that could float and move at will. Apart from the fact that its defense was slightly weaker than a real wizard tower, in other aspects, the giant floating ships were close to perfection. Therefore, after a few battles with the giant floating ships, all the Northern Witches were deeply interested in this silver fortress that could fly high in the sky. The Northern Witches were not a bunch of barbarian women. Their attainments in witchcraft and high-grade knowledge had also reached the peak. They were naturally full of curiosity about the magic system of the giant floating ships. With the knowledge, abilities, and resource reserves of the Northern Witches, it was not difficult to build such a giant metal ship. However, the difficult part was to move such a huge object. The magical energy consumed at every moment was extremely shocking. If the giant floating ships did not have external energy and relied on burning magic crystals to move them, it would probably burn an entire magic crystal mountain in a month. Therefore, the knowledgeable Northern Witches paid special attention to the power core of the giant floating ships. Finally, through various witchcraft methods, they discovered the existence of the magic furnace. This mystical magical furnace was actually able to penetrate the planar barrier, continuously absorbing violent and ferocious chaos energy from the endless void before using special methods to tame it and convert it into corresponding magic energy. This kind of technology and knowledge was obviously more profound and mysterious than the elemental altar of the Wizard Tower. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the ability and means to create the magical furnace was far more valuable than these giant airships. At this point, those who had looked down on legendary fire wizards in the past had finally corrected their attitudes and realized that Grimm was indeed a terrifying and talented genius wizard. Not to mention anything else, just the technology to build the magic furnace could make him the most valuable and most convincing genius wizard in the sorcerer world. Unfortunately, this magic furnace was undoubtedly the core secret of the Crimson family. Therefore, apart from drooling over it, the Northern Witches had no other way to obtain it. Thuna had thought of bargaining with Grimm through Alice to see if she could obtain the magic furnace technology through a resource exchange. However, Grimm's feedback immediately blocked this path. Grimm's conditions were very simple. The Crimson family could sell a batch of magic furnace products to the Northern Witches, but the Witch Council had to approve Alice's marriage to him. To be honest, after hearing this condition, Thuna almost immediately decided to give up. After all, the Northern Witches were a relatively closed and regional wizard organization. For a long time, they had carefully balanced the witch factions and worked hard to maintain the witch traditions of the past. Letting Alice, the leader of the Witches of Destiny, marry Grimm was undoubtedly a challenge to the ruling position of the Northern Witches. This was something they would never agree to. However, if they could reverse the situation and let the legendary fire wizard Grimm marry into the Tower of Destiny and become a vassal of the Northern Witches, they would welcome it with open arms and legs. Unfortunately, with Grimm's current status, this idea was simply not feasible. The Northern Witches were revered, while the Central Continent was revered by the strong. Once a powerful being like Grimm lowered his status and became a vassal of the Northern Witches, his power to unify the entire Central Continent would be gone. The popularity that Grimm had painstakingly accumulated would vanish in an instant, and the Crimson family would become a target of suspicion and resistance from the Central Continent. Many times, things in the world were laughable. Some things that clearly sounded very ridiculous would be especially serious and nitpicking when it was placed on certain characters and certain people. They could not even tolerate the slightest flaw or imperfection. Therefore, not just the Northern Witches, even in the Central Continent and the Crimson family, there were many voices of resistance and opposition to the union of Grimm and Alice. The union of two great forces would even affect the growth and decline of the Sorcerer Continent. Such a huge matter could not be left up to the two and the forces behind them to be careless. After all, the Northern Witches were a totalitarian organization built around the Witch King. Any attempt to challenge the ruling position of the witches would be unanimously opposed by all the witches. Chapter 1377. Darking Valley. The unrest in the valley was still ongoing. After many rounds of purging and cleaning, most of the foreign invaders in the abyss of the Dark Ink Valley had been killed. However, the chaos of the laws of the dimension caused by this had turned the area into a dead zone. Ordinary creatures could not even survive for a second at the bottom of the Dark Ink Valley. The environment and the laws of the dimension were so bad that they could not sustain the existence of life. The consequence of this was that the laws of the dimension of the sorcerer world had been pushed back, and the control of the Dark Ink Valley had been handed over to the laws of chaos. Here, chaos was the main axis, and disorder was the orthodox. Everything that the sorcerers were familiar with in the past had become unrecognizable, turned upside down. In such an environment, the sorcerers no longer had any advantages. In fact, they were even suppressed by the laws of chaos, making it difficult for them to move forward, and danger lurked everywhere. On the contrary, the otherworld demons that were proficient in the laws of chaos were like fish in water, becoming even more ferocious and unrestrained. Ever since the laws of chaos had taken over the Dark Ink Valley, the Wizard Association no longer sent teams of sorcerers into the valley. Instead, they firmly guarded the wizard towers at the exit of the valley to prevent the overly powerful otherworld demons from entering the association's territory. Every day, there would be dozens or even hundreds of magical creatures scuttling out of the valley, wanting to enter the sorcerer world and feast. Thus, continuous battles and all sorts of strange massacres took place at the exit. For those who were confident in their bravery and tried to force their way in, a round of lightning smoke cannon spells would be enough to kill them. The only thing they had to worry about were those with strange magical abilities. They were either as fast as lightning or as swift as the wind, barging past the wizard beast army without giving them a chance to react. They also possessed some kind of strange invisibility ability, sneaking past the gaps in the defense line. They also flew into the sky and tunneled underground, bypassing the Wizard Pagoda's defense line. Regardless of which it was, the Wizard Association could only try their best to intercept and kill them, trying their best to reduce the pressure on the local defenses. Of course, there was no line of defense that could really be impenetrable. Thus, the Wizard Association's motto was to catch the big and let go of the small. Those level 3 and 4 evil beasts could not be easily released into the Dark Ink Valley. As for those little fellows that were hard to kill and impossible to guard against, if they were really lacking in manpower, they would just turn a blind eye and let them pass. In any case, the Wizard Association had a complete and rigorous defense mechanism in every region. Once these invaders showed themselves, there would naturally be local sorcerers responsible for surrounding and annihilating them. As for the citizens and financial losses they caused before they were killed, it was one of the unavoidable costs of facing the Great Mana Tide. After all, this was a demon tide that only appeared once in 10,000 years. On the 48th day of the demon tide, it was still an ordinary day, as if nothing was different from the past. Saguli sat within the main control wizard formation of the War Wizard Pagoda, number 107, as usual, using the dense and mysterious wizard formations around him to control all the movements at the exit of the Dark Ink Valley not far away. Life detection, wizard formation; elemental detection, wizard formation; heat detection, wizard formation; alert, wizard formation; motion detection, wizard formation. A large number of mysterious wizard formations with dozens of different modes and different detection methods were silently operating, constantly scanning and sensing the movements near the exit. Suddenly, one of the dozens of wizard formations operating continuously in front of him suddenly flickered, and a blinding red light lit up within. It's the Earth Amplitude Oscillation Wizard Formation with the furthest detection range. Saguli swept his gaze across, and could not help but mutter to himself, could something have happened at the bottom of the valley? As he daydreamed, he pressed the third communication crystal button on his left. Mars, there's movement at the bottom of the valley. Use the wizard eye to check. Yes. The order was quickly transmitted to a secret wizard room on the third level of the War Wizard Pagoda. Here, the level 1 wizard Mars hurriedly climbed out of his simple bed and stood straight in the center of the complicated wizard formation carved on the floor. As he chanted an incantation, a wizard eye the size of a human head appeared around the War Wizard Pagoda, number 107. Under the control of his consciousness, it tore through the thick fog and flew toward the entrance at the bottom of the valley. The fog and the magical water mirror shook continuously, and with the arrival of the wizard eye, it silently parted to two sides, revealing the terrifying scene behind it. The ground was littered with corpses and the remains of various ferocious and terrifying magical beasts piled up together, forming a bloody path that led straight to the bottom of the Black Ink Valley. The air was filled with a thick stench of blood, and the mournful wails of souls lingered in the air. The wizard eye tore through the fog, following the bloody path all the way down, silently flying toward the depths of the valley. At first, everything in the mirror was still very clear, and the detection range was as high as 100 meters. But as he gradually descended to the bottom of the valley, the aura of the laws of the dimension became thinner and more distorted. The scenes in the mirror also became more and more blurry, and the range of his senses was also reduced to a radius of 10 meters around the wizard eye. The corpses of the magical beasts he saw along the way were also getting more and more violent. This was evident from the size of their skeletons and the ferociousness of their corpses. But just as the wizard eye floated 8 meters above the ground and slowly flew toward the bottom of the valley, the entire valley, including the walls on both sides, began to tremble rhythmically. Dong, dong, dong. It was as if there was a peerless, ferocious beast slowly climbing up the valley, and the entire valley was trembling because of its every move. Not only the ground, but even the fog and air were trembling along with the shock waves. The images transmitted by the wizard eye were blurry and out of focus, difficult to discern. Suddenly, the fog not far away parted, and an exceptionally large and strange magical beast barged into the image. In the next second, the witchcraft eye exploded. Far away at the exit of the valley, the level 1 wizard controlling the wizard eye in the War Wizard Pagoda, number 107, shivered in fear, hurriedly contacting his superior, the level 2 wizard Saguli. Quick, prepare the protective barrier. Giant war beast. It's a giant war beast this time. Shortly after, an ear-piercing alarm spread throughout the entire forest of Towers of War. The War Wizard Pagoda began to operate. From the base to the tip of the pagoda, The densely packed and complicated runic wizard formations lit up one after another. Eggshell-like energy protective barriers appeared one after another, enveloping the war wizard pagoda within them, isolating them from the outside world. Following that, a tidal wave of energy began to gather toward the war wizard pagoda, encircling the bodies of the pagoda, ready to transform into streaks of violent attack-type wizard spells at any time to deal a heavy blow to the enemy. Just as they finished their preparations, a deafening, ear-piercing howl of an ape reverberated through the area at the exit of the valley. In the next second, a giant berserk ape over 50 meters tall, covered in short, thick, black hair, charged out of the fog. Its body was tall and mighty, its limbs thick and powerful, and its body was covered in black hair. On its ferocious and terrifying face, a pair of scarlet, blood-red eyes were like searchlights, fiercely scanning the surroundings. A low, muffled, thunder-like roar came from its slightly opened fangs, and two thick puffs of white smoke came out of its nostrils as it huffed and puffed. Level 4. This was a Level 4 giant berserk ape. Almost at the instant that it saw the identity of the other party, bolts of violent lightning had already streaked across the sky, striking toward it. The giant berserk ape's gaze turned ferocious, its hands hugging its head as it crouched down. Balls of brown smoke formed around its body, quickly concealing itself. In the next second, the entire battlefield was engulfed in blinding lightning. Thunder rumbled, lightning crackled. The center of the battlefield was engulfed by a ball of white lightning storm. Countless water droplet-shaped lightning balls flew in all directions, creating a series of crackling explosions wherever they landed. The entire battlefield was instantly filled with the smell of flesh and blood being scorched by lightning. The wild lightning storm lasted for more than 10 seconds before it gradually subsided. After the white light had completely dissipated, the gigantic charred mountain of flesh in the center of the battlefield was revealed. Finally, the mountain of flesh moved slightly. Large balls of charred and withered flesh fell from the mountain of flesh, as if there was a black rain falling on the battlefield. Suddenly, on the charred mountain of flesh, a pair of blood-red eyes the size of a millstone opened abruptly, its ferocious gaze staring straight at the war wizard pagoda number 107 that was closest to it. The power of the attack is still not enough. Wizard Saguli, who was in charge of the war wizard pagoda number 107, felt his heart thumping wildly. He roared maniacally at all the communication crystals. Continue to attack. Continue to attack. Within his field of vision, the 12 war wizard pagoda once again started to gather energy with difficulty, bolts of dazzling lightning flickering on the surface of the pagoda. Clearly, if they were given another 7 to 8 seconds to prepare, the next round of lightning attacks would descend from the sky, drowning the terrifying enemy in the terrifying waves of lightning. Unfortunately, the giant berserk ape obviously would not give them this chance. With an earth-shattering roar, the giant berserk ape's body shook violently, shaking off the charred flesh on the surface of its body. Completely disregarding its terrifying injuries, it pounced toward the war wizard pagoda number 107 like a mad tiger. If the giant berserk ape were to stand up like a human, the 27-meter-tall war wizard pagoda would only reach the height of its navel. It launched a ruthless attack without any regard for its own life. Its giant, meteorite-like fist brought with it a whistling wind as it directly shattered the energy barrier outside the war wizard pagoda, its fist landing fiercely on the center of the pagoda. A terrifying, loud crack could be heard. The war wizard pagoda number 107 was actually broken in half, broken by a single punch. The upper half of the pagoda flew a few hundred meters away with a whoosh, rolling all the way and disappearing without a trace. The remaining lower half of the pagoda was a mess, a series of explosions from the wizard formations lingering in the ears. Those with sharp eyes could still see the panicked human wizards in the wizard's secret room that only had half of the pagoda left. They lifted their heads and feared a look at the ferocious giant ape, all of them taking out wizard scrolls, wanting to escape to the other war wizard pagoda. Within the wizard pagoda's space, rays of dazzling teleportation light appeared one after another. However, there were always a few people who were too slow. By the time they sensed that the atmosphere was not right and took out their escape scrolls to escape, the world in front of them suddenly turned dark. The giant berserk ape's terrifying iron fist that covered the sky and covered the earth came crashing down once again. Thump! The remaining lower half of the War Wizard Pagoda was smashed into pieces along with the base of the pagoda. Chapter 1378. The power of a level 4 creature was indeed not something that could be dealt with using ordinary methods. Even though the bloodline of the berserk giant ape's main body was not very noble, the terrifying power it could unleash once it advanced to level 4 was enough to kill all enemies in the mortal world who dared to oppose it. Even a real wizard's pagoda would find it hard to defend against such a powerful creature, much less a simplified version of the war wizard's pagoda. Hence, the moment the berserk giant ape revealed its true form, a small war wizard's pagoda immediately became a sacrificial offering for it to establish its might. This was not the end. The ferocious-looking berserk giant ape, whose fur was charred black, grabbed a 5-meter-wide piece of the broken wall of the tower and smashed it toward another war wizard tower nearby. Its main body hammered its chest a few times before turning around and pouncing toward the third war wizard's pagoda. Attack! Attack! Use your most powerful wizard spells. Release the wizard beasts. Use the wizard beasts to hold it back. The berserk giant ape's outburst scared the wizards in charge of the war wizard's pagoda until their faces turned ashen. They shouted maniacally as they secretly touched the escape scrolls they kept close to their bodies. The teleportation waymarks had already been set up in advance. At the critical moment, they could instantly bring them to the wizard tower behind them by activating the escape scrolls. This was also the only reason they dared to station themselves in the war wizard's pagoda. Bolts of lightning once again descended from the sky, striking the berserk giant ape until it stumbled. The hair on its body stood up, and large shard marks appeared on its back and shoulders. But even such a powerful wizard spell could not kill it. In fact, it was difficult to even slow its movements. The berserk giant ape picked up a giant stone slab from the ground and raised it high above its head, blocking the bolts of lightning that were striking it. It then charged toward the nearest few war wizards' pagoda with large strides. Punching, kicking, and ramming. What kind of war wizard's pagoda would be able to withstand the gentle attacks of a 50-meter-tall berserk giant ape? One after another, the war wizard pagodas were smashed and destroyed by the berserk giant apes as if they were sugar canes. The association's wizards inside were either killed or fled, and the casualties were grave. The attacks of the war wizard pagoda had also inflicted heavy injuries on the berserk giant ape, but these injuries were obviously not enough to stop its actions. Instead, they stimulated its ferocious nature, causing its every move to become crazier and wilder. Seeing a nightmarish class 4 dire beast wreaking havoc in the war tower forest, the association's wizards were infuriated. Under their urging with all their might, a series of swift and violent spells bombarded the giant ape from all directions at an unprecedented speed. The giant ape screamed miserably again and again, and its ferocious might became even stronger. In less than a quarter of an hour, 8 wizard towers of war had been destroyed by the berserk giant apes. The resulting loss of wizards made the level 4 bloodline wizard Neve, who was in charge of wizard tower number 3, furious. Of course, as a human wizard, going out to fight an irrational beast head-on was obviously not in line with the calm and wise demeanor of a wizard. Hence, the sky above wizard tower number 3 flickered. With a massive amount of magical energy as the base and her own bloodline power as the guide, a terrifying giant snake that was 30 meters long, covered in strange dark green scales, appeared. This was a bloodline projection that Neve had created with the help of the tower's power. It possessed a terrifying power that was more than 2 times that of her main body. The moment the dark green giant snake appeared, the invincible berserk giant ape on the battlefield suddenly stopped in its tracks. It slowly turned its body and stared at the projection. Both parties were separated by a distance of nearly 1,000 meters, followed by a dozen wizard towers of war, facing each other from afar. The eyes of the bloodline giant snake, projected by Neve, were faintly opening and closing. Several strange dark green spots of light floated at the edge of the strange purple pupils. The giant snake flicked its long and thin forked tongue. Amidst the hissing sound, a chilling and terrifying aura instantly spread across the battlefield. This giant snake clearly possessed a terrifying poisonous ability. Once bitten by it, no antidote would work under the effects of the strange law of poison. The only thing that could defend against the power of the poison was an individual's poison resistance and resilience of life. Hence, after sensing the power of the other party, even the cruel berserk giant ape had to be careful, afraid that it would become a sacrifice for the other party's wizard spell if it was not careful. It had no choice. Even though the berserk giant ape was not very intelligent, it knew where the real danger lay. Even though it was locked in battle with the wizard towers of war, and its injuries were serious on the surface, its life source was not harmed at all. In other words, no matter how many wizard towers of war it faced, as long as it had enough time, the berserk giant ape would be able to destroy them one by one, turning them into sacrifices to vent its anger. There was no way the wizard towers of war could threaten its life. But this terrifying giant snake that had suddenly appeared was different. To put it bluntly, the only thing on the battlefield that could threaten the life of the berserk giant ape was this mysterious giant snake. Hiss, hiss, hiss. With the support of the wizard's pagoda, Neve had no need to fear this ridiculous berserk giant ape. The mysterious giant snake floating above Wizard Pagoda number 3 opened its mouth wide, shooting a ball of green poisonous liquid toward the other party like an arrow. The berserk giant ape's expression tensed, extending its arms forward. Large balls of brown smoke rose from its 2 giant arms, turning into a giant rock in front of it. Poof! With a dull thud, the ball of poisonous liquid hit the giant rock. Immediately, the terrifying sound of corroding poison came from the battlefield, thick white smoke rising from the giant rock. The white smoke did not dissipate, instead eerily bypassing the giant rock and instantly entering the giant ape's cave-sized nose. Roar! The berserk giant ape was instantly enraged as the poisonous smoke entered its body. It swayed its body twice, feeling a terrifying pain that felt like it was being pierced by needles. It roared angrily at the sky, immediately emitting a ferocious fury, using its boiling blood to suppress the wisps of poisonous energy. Whoosh whoosh, the fierce wind whistled as the giant ape's 2 hands flashed with yellow light. Every time it flashed, a 5-meter-wide boulder would be condensed out of thin air. Then, with both hands, it threw the boulder at the mysterious giant snake like a hail of cannons. The other party was much smaller than it, clearly not known for its strength. Thus, the berserk giant ape used this method to force the other party to come out and fight. As for why the berserk giant ape did not pounce over, the berserk giant apes only liked to settle everything with violence, but that did not mean that they were brainless. The wizard tower was right beneath the mysterious giant snake. If the berserk giant ape got too close to the other party and was entangled by the power of the wizard's pagoda, it could easily create an opportunity for the other party to deal a fatal blow. Thus, the berserk giant ape agilely dodged the other party's poisonous spit as it gathered boulders and threw them at the wizard tower. The 2 colossal creatures started attacking each other with the wizard's pagoda at the center. In an instant, the whole battlefield was turned upside down, and it was beyond recognition. The war wizard's pagoda that was sandwiched between the 2 level 4 experts were undoubtedly in a tragic state. They would all die without a complete corpse no matter which side's attack hit them. Even the war wizard's pagoda would not be able to withstand the poisonous spit of the mysterious giant snake for long, before its protective barrier was corroded. The body of the War Wizard's pagoda would crumble like a sand tower that had been weathered for many years. If it was hit by the giant ape's boulders, it would cause the wizard's pagoda to crumble. If the wizards inside did not escape in time, they would either die or be severely injured. When the deities fight, the little devils suffer. The dozen War Wizards pagodas that the Wizard Association had set up near the exit of the valley were uprooted by the berserk giant ape in less than an hour, completely erased from the map. If not for the terrifying aftershocks from the battle between the giant ape and the giant snake, the ferocious beasts and magical creatures hiding deep within the Black Ink Valley would have long since swarmed out and fled in different directions. Even though the mysterious giant snake that Neve's projection had transformed into had alarming offensive capabilities, it was hard for it to deal with the berserk giant ape that had thick skin, exuberant life force, and immense strength. If not for the protection of the wizard's pagoda, the mysterious giant snake might have been torn apart by the giant ape in less than an hour, turning into a ball of chaotic magical energy. Of course, if Neve was willing to risk her life and fight, there was a high chance that she could poison the giant ape to death under the pagoda at the cost of serious injuries. But the losses would be the association's, and her life would be hers. Nifu could clearly distinguish which was more important. Finally, after fighting for some time, Neve became a little angry. She silently sent a message to the faraway wizard's pagoda number 2. "Help me out, Olivier." A moment later, a familiar mental ripple sounded in her mind. "I thought you wouldn't need my help. I'll help you control it. Attack with all your might." In the next second, a powerful and strange witchcraft power descended from the sky and instantly enveloped the giant berserk ape. As if it had suddenly fallen into a terrifying quagmire, the berserk giant ape's every movement suddenly became sluggish. It raised its right hand, wanting to throw the giant rock in its hand at the giant snake, but its entire body and arm seemed to be bound by invisible chains. Every movement it made was difficult and heavy. Gravity ring of light. And it was a gravity ring of light that was 100 times more powerful. Seizing this opportunity, the mysterious giant snake shot out like a lightning snake, instantly using its thick and long snake tail to entangle the giant ape tightly. The triangular head of the giant snake was raised high, biting down on the giant ape's neck. Roar! The berserk giant ape raised its head and let out a long cry of pain, desperately beating and pulling at the slippery body of the snake. Yellow smoke surged out of its body, desperately entering the body of the snake. Even though the mysterious giant snake was only a bloodline projection of Neve, a large portion of her consciousness was stored within it. Thus, all the damage suffered by the giant snake was fed back to the snake woman Neve within the wizard's pagoda. The snake woman Neve was also in excruciating pain, but she still gritted her teeth and endured the pain, using all her strength to channel the terrifying poisonous energy into the giant ape's body. Chapter 1379. The appearance of the Type 4 Berserk Ape was like a warning signal. From then on, the invasion of the sorcerer world by creatures from other planes gradually escalated, gradually slipping to the edge of losing control. However, with the power of the sorcerer civilization, dealing with these scattered invaders was not a problem. If they only wanted to sneak into the sorcerer world and plunder some rare resources that were not available in the outside world, there was a high chance that they would succeed. After all, the size of the sorcerer world was too large. It would be extremely difficult to defend such a vast area so that not even a drop of water could leak in. Therefore, as long as the invaders kept a low profile and possessed some powerful and strange abilities, they would not be able to escape. In that case, the native sorcerers of the sorcerer world wouldn't have to fight to the death with such a powerhouse from another plane. Most of the time, as long as the other party didn't go too far, he would turn a blind eye to it. However, the sporadic stowaways could be ignored. However, the large-scale, organized races from other planes that wanted to take root and colonize the Magus world were absolutely intolerable no matter which Magus organization. Ever since the outbreak of the Magic Tide, These powerful wizard organizations in the Sorcerer Continent had encountered large-scale invasions of otherworld creatures. Everywhere they fought, they were inextricably entangled, and all of them were extremely busy. Out of all the sorcerer organizations, the Sorcerer Association was probably the most unfortunate. Their spatial rift was the largest, and the otherworld forces that could barge in were also the most powerful. Thus, they attracted the most troublesome calamity creatures. It was rumored that 3 well-known disaster lords had set their eyes on the spatial crevice at the same time, and they had even built a dimensional gate to force high-level fierce beasts they had enslaved to attack the Association's wizard pagoda. Even more powerful calamity creatures were entrenched at the bottom of Abyss Valley. They gathered in groups to break through the defensive line of the Association in one fell swoop, and barged into the Magus world to plunder without restraint. Judging from all the signs, the situation of the Wizard Association was not looking good. If the number 1 sorcerer organization in the sorcerer world was in such a state, then the other sorcerer organizations would be even worse off. Not to mention anything else, just the central continent was in trouble. If the Sorcerer Association was invaded by calamities, then the central continent was also in trouble. It was invaded by demons. The Abyss world was undoubtedly a much larger and more terrifying civilization system than the Sorcerer world. There was no end to it, and it was a suffocating and terrifying place. The environment there was harsh, and it was a dangerous place where no life could enter. There was no morality or ethics there. It was a bloody place where endless killings took place. There was no friendship, family, or love there. It was an evil place with only betrayal, killing, and destruction. That place was known as the bowel of the world, also known as the lower plane. It was also the place where the entire multiverse settled and excreted garbage and waste. If the multiverse was viewed as a living being, the endless years of growth would have allowed its body to accumulate and congregate unimaginably profound toxins. These toxins gathered together and settled over the years, forming the current abyssal plane. It could be said that all the negative, evil, and chaotic filth in the multiverse had gathered in the abyss. Over time, although that place was barren and desolate, it also gave birth to an extremely strange magical creature. They were abyssal demons. Although the abyssal plane was vast, it was extremely barren in resources. The demons born, they were constantly killing for the few resources, using the flesh and blood they plundered to maintain their lives, and using the energy they plundered to strengthen themselves. They grew through killing, strengthened through killing, and stepped onto the path of plain conquest step by step. After the abyssal demons grew, the barren resources there were no longer enough to support their continued evolution. For themselves and the abyssal plane, they attacked and killed everywhere, searching for any weak beings that could invade and plunder. For the sake of warm flesh, for the sake of delicious souls, they fearlessly charged into any material plane, using their strength and bravery to harvest and plunder everything that could be taken away. They did not fear death. Even if they died in battle on the main plane, they could use the strange demonic brand to revive in the abyssal plane. And the more they killed and plundered, the more souls they plundered, and the more feedback the abyssal formed by the huge abyssal plane would give them. It could be said that low-level demons grew into mid-level and high-level demons by relying on bloody slaughter and the feedback from the plane. It could be said that no plane's consciousness could be as crazy, chaotic, and evil as the abyssal will. Not only did the abyssal will not forbid internal slaughter, but it also especially appreciated this kind of meaningless internal conflict. Not only was the abyssal will brutal and chaotic, but it also deeply rooted this belief in all demon creatures born in the abyssal plane. Hence, there was no so-called loyalty and trustworthiness in the abyssal plane. Instead, chaos, evil, and destruction were the main rhythm of the plane that had to be followed. It was easy to imagine just how powerful and terrifying an evil demon powerhouse would be after killing their way out of such a frenzied and violent state of killing. In history, there were some overconfident people from a main plane who believed in order and kindness. They actually killed their way into the abyssal plane with the slogan of purifying evil and purging demons, intending to turn it into a pure land of the human world. Unfortunately, they did not even conquer 1/10,000th of the abyssal plane before they were counterattacked by the gathered abyssal demons into their own source plane. Hence, the plane was destroyed and life withered. Even their source plane was dragged back to the abyssal plane by the abyssal demons, and thus became a part of the huge abyssal world. Strictly speaking, the abyssal world was actually the rotting eater of the multiverse. The material planes that lost in the planar wars would eventually lose their origin, their laws would shatter, and all life would perish. The remains of the planes would drift and sink in the Stellaris until they fused with the abyssal realm, becoming abandoned objects in a world intestine. Therefore, the existence of the abyssal world was a necessity for the multiverse. However, once the abyssal world expanded too much, it would instead corrode the healthy development of the multiverse. Therefore, based on various theoretical studies, the ancient magi of the past had proposed some novel ideas, believing that the great manatide that occurred once every 10,000 years was a spontaneous self-purification activity of the multiverse. There were too many toxins and viruses accumulated in the body, and so a great manatide would come at the right time. It would incite cosmic tumors, such as the abyssal world and the calamity world, to collide and clash with the main material plane, thereby borrowing the power of various major plane civilizations to dispel or limit the tumor's development. It must be said that such theories were acknowledged by most magi. At least, the Magus world's records of the development of the multiverse did indeed operate according to this law. However, everything in the past could only be learned from books, but everything now required one to use one's life and courage to experience. Because the demons had really come. The Great Spatial Rift, this place that had brought endless wealth and glory to the Arden family, had now become a nightmare that they could not get rid of. Just like those calamity creatures, the greater demon lords of the Abyss world had also set their sights on the Sorcerer world, which was rich in resources and had a huge population. They could not wait to barge in and plunder without restraint. Although the Magus civilization was powerful, it was still several levels lower than the Abyssal world. Fortunately, the individually stronger calamity creatures had set their eyes on the Ink Abyss Valley within the Magus Union's territory, wanting to use it as a transit point to invade the Magus continent. The weaker demons did not dare to compete with the calamity creatures and could only turn around and attack the Great Spatial Rift in the center. They set up a plane door in the abyssal plane, directly connecting it to the Great Spatial Rift. They then drove an endless stream of low-level and mid-level demons into the Magus world, using their flesh and blood to pollute the plane's space, thus forming a chaotic domain near the Great Spatial Rift. In this chaotic domain, the suppression of the abyssal demons had to endure from the plane was gone. If a native magi of the Magus world dared to show themselves, they would have to face a group of terrifying demons whose strength had not weakened in the slightest. In a tall wizard's pagoda, less than 3,000 meters away from the Great Spatial Rift, all the level 4 wizards had solemn expressions as they stared at the magical mirror in front of them. They were secretly shocked by what they saw. The magical mirror showed the scene around the Great Spatial Rift. Over there, everything they were familiar with in the past had disappeared. The sky was dark red. Rolling waves of heat surged between the heavens and the earth, roasting people until they felt dizzy and confused. The ground was scorched, and no soil or plants could be seen. The bedrock underneath was exposed. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, and scalding red magma gushed out of them, extending on the surface of the ground like a scorching fire snake. In the dark red sky, abyssal demons of all shapes and sizes had gathered in groups, arguing and shoving each other. If not for the demon lords in front of the Great Spatial Rift intimidating them with their violent auras, they might have started killing each other before the wizards could attack. As far as the eye could see, the terrifying figures of dark red demons could be seen everywhere. Among them, the most numerous were small demons. They had short, lean bodies about 1.2 meters tall, and fleshy scales glowed with a dark red luster. Other than that, they had sharp horns on their heads, fangs in their mouths, and a pair of fleshy wings on their backs that flapped nonstop, as well as a slender, hairless bony tail. They also held a small steel fork that flickered with an evil light in their hands. They were the lowest level of cannon fodder in the abyssal demon army, imps. Chapter 1380. Don't look down on the little evil demons. They were also quite strong. After all, the status of imps in the abyssal plane was equivalent to that of barefoot farmers in the wizard world. With the eyes of the wizards, they could naturally see that a little devil could easily slaughter a dozen barefoot farmers. The combat power it possessed was already comparable to that of an intermediate sorcerer apprentice. Although there were many wizard apprentices in the wizard world, they were not as numerous as the imps in the abyssal plane. Therefore, in terms of power, the abyssal plane was far superior to the wizard world. This power was not only reflected in the individual combat power of the basic units, but also in all aspects of the civilization. Andrews of the Arden family had no choice but to send out a request for reinforcements in the face of the invasion of several level 5 and 6 demon lords from the abyssal plane. He summoned all the wizards in the central continent to help him defend against the invasion of the demons. Other than the few level 4 wizards from the Crimson family, more than half of the 13 level 4 wizards from the central continent had arrived. They stood in the headquarters of the Arden family in the Wizard's Pagoda, silently observing the situation at the spatial fissure. They felt an indescribable sense of relief and relief. Fortunately, the spatial fissure was located in the territory of the Arden family. If they were in their own family's territory, they would probably be in the same state as Andrews, worrying about the demons. Beat them back. To be honest, all of the level 4 wizards had the same idea before coming here. They wanted to gather the power of the central continent and beat the insolent abyssal demons back to their homeland. However, after seeing the real situation, they had no choice but to lower their expectations. They only hoped that the demons could be confined to the vicinity of the spatial fissure and not invade other territories. What made them change their minds was the terrifying number and strength of the abyssal demons. At this moment, there were a total of 5 tier 4 demons standing guard near the spatial tear. There was a quaset with rough skin and a fat body that looked like a skin toad. There was a succubus with an enchanting body and a hot body, a tall, slender, high-rank flame demon that was constantly surrounded by leaping fireballs. It was an especially tall and muscular berserker demon who was surrounded by a strange yellowish-green stench. A tall female, 6-armed naga with 3 pairs of arms and a snake's tail. Beside them were groups of middle and high-rank demons. Looking at their imposing auras and brandishing claws, all of them were terrifying demons that were proficient in chaotic battles and slaughter. This was the disadvantage of fighting with demons. As long as they were mid-level or high-level demons, they would be proficient in precise teleportation. In this way, there was no distinction between the front and the rear. As long as the battle started, the middle and high-level demons would rely on their dual cultivation of magic and martial arts to travel everywhere. If they were not careful, they could easily be killed by them. Thus, even if the level 4 wizards in front of them far outnumbered the abyssal demons, if they were to really fight, the outcome of the battle would be decided in an instant without the protection of the Wizard's Pagoda. "When will Lord Grimm arrive?" Declan asked in a low voice. Hearing this question, all the Tier 4 Magi pricked up their ears and turned to look at Andrews. Although they had come here at his invitation, it did not mean that they had to serve the Arden family. After all, there was a risk of dying when fighting against the abyssal demons. If there were 1 or 2 super powerhouses here, they would feel much more at ease. After all, they were old buddies in the central continent. If Andrews really collapsed here, the entire central continent would have to bear the brunt of the abyssal demon's attack. With this awareness, as long as the danger could be controlled to an acceptable level, everyone was willing to contribute some of their strength. Of course, they had to have someone at the front to fight. In the past, They might have felt indignant that Grimm had become the #1 wizard in the Central Continent and had wanted to fight him to the end. But now, seeing the difficult situation the Central Continent was facing, they felt a sense of relief. They felt lucky that they were not the ones in that position. Otherwise, faced with such a situation, he would probably be as helpless as everyone else present. Andrews scanned the faces of the people coldly and said, "I've sent a message about the situation here, but I haven't received a reply yet." But, after a moment of hesitation, he continued, "Lord Mary has been here for more than a month, and she has severely injured 2 demon lords. Otherwise, they would not have been so obedient. What about Monash? Where is Lord Gaia? At this time, he should be showing his lower body." This time it was Matthew who asked the question. Obviously, without a super powerhouse present, everyone's hearts were unable to calm down. Before Andrews could speak, a loud and impassioned voice suddenly came from outside the hall. "Don't worry about me. I'm already here." With a loud buzzing sound, Monash, Gaia led the 2 clansmen into the hall and appeared in front of everyone. The wizards who were on good terms with him quickly nodded in greeting. "Monash?" Gaia looked around and nodded slightly. She did not return the greetings one by one and went to the huge magic mirror on her own. From here, they could clearly see that the spatial rift was still constantly swallowing abyssal demons. Every time the space fluctuated, it meant that the abyssal demon's strength had increased by a fraction. Although most of the demons that came in were low-level and mid-level demons, if he allowed them to increase their numbers, it would be much more troublesome to deal with them in the future. What are you waiting for? He hurriedly took action and chased the demon lords away. Then, he thought of a way to seal the spatial crack. This way, even if there's any trash trying to sneak in, it'll be much more difficult. Gaia was still as hot-tempered as ever. When he saw the situation in front of him, he was immediately enraged. "Lord Grimm isn't here yet. Why don't we wait a little longer?" Nicholas asked carefully with a reluctant look. No wonder the 3 major organizations look down on us. What's wrong? Without Grimm, you guys don't even know how to fight?" Everyone looked at each other awkwardly. They were all a little hesitant. Although I know Monash, Gaia's words made sense, but when it came to their own safety and interests, it was difficult for them to work together. After all, the territory was someone else's, but his life was his. A bunch of cowards. Gaia's face was filled with exasperation, and he shouted, "Leave that Hezru and Quaset to me. You guys divide the rest." The Golden Titan bloodline was indeed unyielding. Monash immediately took on the 2 strongest demon overlords as soon as he opened his mouth. This time, everyone was speechless. Andrews' face was filled with joy, and he shouted, "I'll take that Balru." Fighting a grade 4 Balru alone was a terrifying challenge for Andrews, but the demon disaster happened in his family's territory. If he didn't fight with his life on the line, these slippery fellows before him wouldn't do anything. Hence, even though it was dangerous, there was no room for regret or retreat. "Leave that 6-armed Naga to me. If it wasn't for her good luck, I would have taken her down long ago." Mary's crisp and gentle voice suddenly sounded in the hall. From her tone, it seemed like she was still dissatisfied with the previous battle. Now, only the weakest succubus was left among the 5 grade 4 demon lords. Nicholas and Matthew looked at each other and stood up simultaneously. "The 2 of us will deal with that succubus. I have some defensive spirit bewitchment equipment on hand. It'll be perfect for dealing with her." With the demon lords assigned, the remaining grade 4 magi could only deal with the mid and high-ranked demons. Even though their mission was slightly easier, it would not be easy for them to complete the mission smoothly, considering the number of mid and high-ranked demons. Sorcerers did not have the useless and cumbersome red tape of human nobles. After deciding on their strategy, the group looked at each other and left the wizard hall in a flash. In the next second, human magi of all shapes and sizes appeared in the sky above the wizard pagoda of the Alden family. There was no need for greetings or scolding. The 5 tall demons standing in front of the spatial crack looked over at the same time, their burning gazes fixed on the human magi. A series of strange, demonic hisses could be heard, and the numerous abyssal demons that filled the entire space began to clamor and roar. They spoke in the demonic language, their voices hoarse and unpleasant to the ears like the croaks of frogs. It was so noisy that it was unbearable. It had to be said that the demons were evil, filthy, and terrifying creatures. There were tens of thousands of abyssal demons gathered in front of them, and the foul smell of the abyss was so thick that it could choke a person to death. The will of the abyss that was seeping out of the spatial crack was also tangling with the consciousness of the sorcerer world, repelling each other. It was obvious that the consciousness of the sorcerer world could not fight against the powerful will of the abyss, and it was in a stage of retreating and resisting with all its might. The consciousness of the sorcerer world within a radius of a few thousand meters around the spatial crack had been repelled. Even the laws of the world and plane that had been constructed here had become fragmented and dilapidated. When the human magi lined up and stood at the front line to fight against the abyssal demons, a dense white light emanated from their bodies. With this white light, the massive and evil will of the abyss would not be able to inflict chaos and disorder on them. This way, they would not have to worry about being infected by the aura of the abyss. This was obviously the sorcerer world's consciousness's commendation for their righteous actions. If they could successfully kill a considerable number of abyssal demons, they would naturally receive rich feedback from the plane's consciousness. Opposite them, the bodies of the demons that had invaded the sorcerer world were also covered in a dense, dark red light. Chapter 1381. The conquest of the plane was actually a battle between two wills. Moreover, the will of the abyss was undoubtedly even more ancient and grand. Hence, apart from protecting several Tier 4 magi from the abyssal will's corrosion, the guardian light provided by the sorcerers will have no other effects. On the other side, the abyssal demons enjoyed an even more comprehensive blessing from the abyss. Apart from the slight increase in strength, agility, physique, and spirit, the thing that increased the most was the cruel and tyrannical killing intent. All the abyssal demons were emitting a dense, dark red light, as if they had been enhanced by the bloodlust spell. Their combat power was almost doubled. This also increased the destructive power of the abyssal demons. "Let's fight," Gaia sighed inwardly. It was as if a golden sun had been stuffed into his body, emitting a dazzling golden light. Shrouded in the golden radiance, Monash Banshee's body was glowing brightly. Gaia's body rapidly expanded like a balloon. Then, a simple and old golden armor appeared on his body, covering most of his body, only exposing his left shoulder and left arm. Golden armor, golden leather skirt, golden boots, golden helmet. Monash, who had transformed into a golden titan? Gaia's entire body shone with a golden radiance. His body was 100 meters tall, and he immediately became the most eye-catching object on the entire battlefield. "Demon, get out of the sorcerer world. Otherwise," he opened his mouth and let out a thunderous roar that sounded like a declaration of doomsday. "Monash?" Gaia raised his hands, and hundreds and thousands of dazzling lightning bolts descended from the sky, gathering between his palms. "Die." As soon as the word "die" came out of his mouth, Monash, Gaia pushed her hands forward, and a lightning waterfall that was as bright as a world engulfed the area occupied by the demons like a violent wave. Crack! After an earth-shattering thunderclap, the dazzling white light slowly faded away, revealing the infernal demon battlefield that had been ravaged by a waterfall of lightning. Tragic. How tragic. It was too tragic. Violent lightning bolts pierced through the tall and sturdy bodies one after another. Even with the demon's magic resistance and vitality, it was not enough to resist such violent lightning abilities. Hence, the lightning waterfall covered an area of 1,000 meters on the battlefield, turning the ground and all the demons on it into charcoal. Only a few Tier 3 demons managed to survive. More than half of their bodies were broken, and even the exposed flesh and internal organs were scorched black. They were struggling to crawl out of the piles of charcoal that could not be identified in their original form. Just one attack, Monash. Gaia had killed more than 10,000 devils, which accounted for more than a quarter of the total number of devils in front of him. The entire battlefield fell silent for a moment. Following that, the eyes of the remaining demons turned red, and they roared loudly as they pounced toward the golden giant that was 100 meters tall. While they charged forward, they hurled spells of various shapes and power at Monash like a storm. Gaia, hammer of chaos, blasphemous words, meteor rain, flesh extraction, high order death, soul extinguishing art. It had to be said that the instantaneous and powerful spells of the middle and high-ranked demons were powerful and hidden, and it was extremely difficult for ordinary creatures to evade them. Monash, who had just charged up his strength to unleash a violent attack. Gaia raised his arms to protect his face, and a golden glow enveloped his body as he forcefully withstood the wave of spells. Although he was able to resist most of the low and mid-grade spells, the attacks from the high-ranked demons were not so easy to deal with. The golden giant staggered backward, the golden glow on the surface of his body flickering. It was obvious that his aura was unstable, and he was wounded repeatedly. However, relying on the extremely powerful Titan bloodline, he managed to withstand the attacks. Only Monash, who had transformed into a golden Titan, could do this. Gaia could do it himself, but if it was any other tier 4 sorcerer present, they would have been injured by the violent wave of spell-like attacks. Let's go too. Can't Monash? We can't let Monash, Gaia, face the enemies on his own. The body refinement sorcerer, Declan, roared. His body instantly transformed into a cannonball, and with a whoosh, he charged into the group of devils. In the next second, his strength exploded. A ring-shaped ripple of energy swept across the battlefield, instantly sending the abyssal devils within it flying, following which, as if an invisible hand had viciously torn them apart, their bodies were flung into the air. In an instant, over 100 abyssal devils of Tier 1, 2, and 3 were killed by Declan, turning into broken toys that rolled around on the ground. The remaining Tier 4 sorcerers exchanged glances and no longer hesitated. One after another, they unleashed their true abilities, unleashing one rapid spell after another on the demon army. In an instant, the abyssal devils were unstoppable. The entire planar battlefield was turned upside down, and casualties were everywhere. After all, Tier 4 sorcerers were still Tier 4 sorcerers. When they unscrupulously displayed their might, the might of the heavens and earth, and the frightening might they displayed was enough to send shivers down one's spine. No one dared to face them head-on anymore. There were 5 demon lords overseeing the battlefield. How could they just sit back and watch as high-ranked human sorcerers slaughter their subordinates? The 5 demon lords let out sharp, hoarse, and deep roars as they transformed into their combat forms, pouncing on the 8 Tier 4 magi that represented the apex strength of humanoid magi. The one leading the charge was naturally the combatant demon that would go berserk whenever it encountered a battle. Combatant demon, rank 4 high demon, evil and chaotic. It had a massive body, nearly 3 meters tall, and its weight was around 350 kilograms. The combatant demon's body was massive. Its massive body also gave it immense strength, allowing it to easily swing its frighteningly large bronze battle axe. The combatant demon's appearance was also very unconventional. It looked like a skinned gorilla tossed into lava and roasted. However, its bulging muscles showed just how difficult it was to deal with. Aside from its ugliness, the most unforgettable aspect of the combatant demon was that its skin would secrete a thick, stinky liquid during battle. This stench had exceeded the limits of an ordinary creature's endurance. Many enemies would die in the combatant demon's warm embrace due to the stench. Hence, watching a violent combatant demon pounce at you is no different from throwing a pile of filthy, disgusting feces at you. Hence, no one would be in a good mood when fighting a combatant demon. However, just as the Tier 4 combatant demon lord was about to pounce at Declan, A spear formed from lightning stabbed into the ground before it. Then, lightning erupted, and a frenzied chain of lightning shot out, pushing the combatant demon back. "Your enemy is me," Monash, who had transformed into a gold titan, said. Gaia, who had transformed into a golden titan, let out a deafening war roar and blocked the combatant demon lord's path. At the same time, the lightning spear in his other hand flew out and slashed at the other Quasa demon overlord. As if it had never been provoked by an enemy before, the combatant demon lord raised its head and let out a strange cry that resembled an ape. It then brandished its massive bronze battle axe and charged at the golden titan. The might of a Tier 4 demon was incomparably violent. All the demonic creatures that stood in its way were instantly sent flying, and the ground crumbled under its powerful stomps. The Hezru leaped up with unparalleled power, cleaving at the gold titan's calf with its axe. It couldn't be helped. The difference in size between the two was too great. Even with a run-up, the combatant demon could only barely reach the golden titan's calf. However, on a Tier 4 battlefield, a gigantic body did not mean absolute strength. Hence, although there was a difference in size of over 20 times, the golden titan would be the one at a disadvantage in a real fight. The golden titan raised its right foot and collided with the combatant demon's bronze battle axe. Boom! A transparent ripple of energy swept out, and the demons that were too close to the golden titan were sent flying like cannonballs, blood spurting from their mouths. Meanwhile, the two parties involved also staggered back, blood dripping from their bodies. The Hezru was at a disadvantage due to its size. Although its strength was not much inferior to Monash's, it could not withstand the amplification effect of its huge size and the Titan bloodline. Thus, it turned into a cannonball and smashed into the group of evil demons, killing 7 to 8 low-level evil demons. On the other hand, Monas Gaia, who had transformed into a golden titan, also stumbled a few steps back. There was a basin-sized hole in the tip of his right foot, and golden blood was flowing out. Monash's strong physique made Monash even stronger. Gaia was the first to recover. He stood up straight again and raised his hands. The violent power of thunder gathered in his palms and condensed into 2 lightning spears that twisted and struggled crazily. "Die, demon!" The next second, Monash. Gaia roared and waved his hands. 2 lightning spears turned into dazzling white light and blasted at the Hezru, who was struggling to get up. With a savage look in his eyes, he grabbed 2 demons around him and threw them away, blocking the spear that was as fast as lightning. Before the power of the lightning spear reached him, the berserker demon's body blurred, and he abruptly disappeared on the spot. Advanced teleportation. This was a strange spell that almost all high-level evil demons were adept at mastering. Using it to avoid the enemy's fatal blow was undoubtedly a demon's specialty. The lightning spears penetrated the bodies of 2 low-level evil demons and pierced into the ground. Then, they instantly exploded into lightning chains that looked like dancing silver snakes. As the lightning roared and wandered, more than 10 abyssal demons in the explosion zone were immediately burned into a pile of charcoal and silently fell to the ground. However, it was obvious that this attack did not hurt the Hezru. Just as the Golden Titan and the Hezru were fighting each other, another Quaset also rushed forward with a sinister smile. In the next second, the Chaos Hammer, which was made up of pure evil runes and abyssal aura, turned into a black light and bombarded the Golden Titan's body. It could not help but hesitate for a moment. Chapter 1382. Asterisk Roar. Asterisk with a pained roar that shook the battlefield. The Golden Titan roared at the sky, its body releasing a blinding, berserk lightning. Before the 2 demon lords could escape, they were engulfed by the lightning storm. By the time they stumbled out of the lightning storm, their bodies were charred black. From afar, they looked like 2 mournful demons that had escaped from a coal mine. Even the pair of demonic wings on their backs had become tattered, and their entire appearance could be said to be extremely miserable. However, Relying on the exuberant vitality of the high-ranked demons that were comparable to undying cockroaches, the two demon lords narrowly avoided the Golden Titan's death kick and scrambled out of its attack range. However, the Titans were famous for being able to attack from afar and close range. Before they could escape, a series of crackling lightning javelins flew over and instantly enveloped them in a huge lightning net. The pained and mournful roars of the two demon overlords immediately rang out. Monash? Gaia was indeed the #1 bloodline magus in the Central Continent. His Golden Titan bloodline was also top-notch. Thus, when he unleashed his full strength, even the two demon lords, who were fearless and had always been the only ones who bullied others unscrupulously, could not withstand it. It had to be said that human magi were a group of intelligent beings that liked to plan before taking action. Monash? Gaia still held the upper hand against the two demon lords, using his peerless strength to control the entire battlefield. Wherever his huge body went, the demons that couldn't dodge in time were either destroyed by the terrifying lightning or turned into a pool of blood under his huge feet, no longer distinguishable from each other. On the other side of the battlefield, Mary, who had turned into a blood-red bat shadow, was already torturing the six-armed snake demon to death. If not for the fact that she wanted to use the Nightmare Castle to capture this female demon, Mary would have skinned her and sucked her dry long ago. Apart from that, the battle between Declan and the high-ranked Balrog was abnormally intense, and it was hard to tell who would gain the upper hand. Fortunately, Declan was not alone. Molten Magma Lord Alfred charged in and used his unique sound wave spell to help him gain the upper hand on the battlefield. The Balrog was a kind of strange demon that leaned towards elemental power. Their physique and strength were much inferior to the Hezrog. However, they were born with a strong fire attribute talent. Therefore, they could control fire as freely and easily as humans could breathe. In addition to their fire talent, their physical strength was also worthy of their identity as demons. Coupled with the terrifying burning domain and flame halo, there were not many enemies who could get close enough to attack them. Although human sorcerers could not be compared to these natural magical creatures in every aspect, from their physical qualities to their elemental talents. However, human sorcerers were able to maximize the effects of their magic tools, allowing them to display their basic combat strength to the fullest. The Flame Demon's fire-type spells were indeed frighteningly powerful. However, by relying on a Tier 4 fire resistance talisman and the body wash he had drunk, Dylan was temporarily immune to fire damage. Using the dazzling combat techniques of the Anatomy Refinery Magus, Declan stuck close to his opponent and beat him until he scurried away like a rat, unable to unleash the terrifying might of a high-ranked Balrog. As for the succubus that Nicholas and Matthew were fighting, there was no suspense at all. Creatures like succubi were not known for their combat strength in the Abyss Demon Camp. Instead, they relied on their sexy and seductive charms to attach themselves to a powerful demon and gain some status. Their main weapons were the demonic whips wrapped around their waists, their claws that were as sharp as daggers, and the succubi's flying kisses that were filled with seduction. Even in the midst of an intense battle, they would not forget to display their seductive figures at all times. As they fought, they threw flirtatious glances and sent flying kisses, the demonic whips in their hands crackling loudly. Even the crackling sounds were mixed in with their alluring moans. If a young magus with insufficient mental strength were to fight a succubus, he would probably faint from their flirtatious glances and flying kisses before the battle even started. Succubi actually loved group battles. Most of the time, with their conscious seduction and seduction, the weaker members of the opposing party would be successfully seduced, and they would turn around and attack their own allies. Unfortunately, this succubus had the misfortune of meeting two crafty and sinister grade 4 magi today, Nicholas and Matthew. At their age, they no longer liked to fight head-on with others. However, this did not mean that their strength was mediocre. On the contrary, Nicholas and Matthew were veteran grade 4 magi who had advanced to grade 4-7 to 800 years ago. Their ranks were not high, but the number of tricks they had up their sleeves left people speechless. The rotting worm parasite was a strange parasite that could cause the flesh and blood of a living being to rot rapidly. The separation dagger was a golden dagger that possessed a strange power. Severed limbs and flesh could not be healed through self-healing or spells. The heartbreak bell was a small metal bell that could shatter the heart of anyone who heard it and kill them. The curse scepter could add a negative curse every 5 fingers after being stained with a drop of the enemy's blood. The curse's effect was random. Shadow Spike. Pierce a spike into the shadow below the target creature, temporarily immobilizing it. To be honest, there were so many magic tools that could truly deal fatal damage to the succubus. However, they all had strange abilities that were disgusting and troublesome. Hence, after being attacked by the 2 treacherous old magi for a while, the succubus overlord, who boasted of her beauty, was already riddled with scars and extremely furious. However, no matter how angry she was, no matter how much she wanted to fight the 2 old magi, they dodged her attacks and continued to torture her unhurriedly. As for the succubus' natural seduction, even if she twisted her waist and threw countless flirtatious glances and flying kisses, the 2 opposite her were like 2 impenetrable blockheads, not feeling anything at all. No, it wasn't that she didn't feel anything, but the 2 treacherous old magi's eyes flashed with greed that even the succubus overlord was somewhat afraid of, forcing her to retreat again and again. She didn't dare to continue fighting with the 2 of them. Such a one-sided beating clearly made the succubus overlord furious. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore and let out an ear-piercing scream. "Mary, you bastard, if you don't make a move, I'm going to die here today. Mary!" Who was Mary? Although Nicholas and Matthew were somewhat curious, they didn't take the succubus' words to heart. They knew that succubi were extremely good at seduction, and had even fused natural seduction into their postures, speech, and every movement of their limbs. Thus, at the start of the battle, they had cast an icy heart spell on themselves, making them immune to all external seduction effects. However, their souls were still licentious and lustful, which was why they had revealed this strange appearance of being cold on the outside and warm on the inside. "Humph, you useless human. You can't even seduce an old human wizard. Now watch me." Along with an extremely violent roar of the devil, flames burst out on the battlefield, and a 5-meter-tall, sturdy devil appeared behind Nicholas and Matthew, the 2 wizards. Then, a giant beheading sword burning with abyssal fire flashed horizontally, instantly cutting through Matthew's external protection and cutting him in half at the waist. Matthew let out a blood-curdling scream as his entire body broke apart in the middle. Then, he exploded into a thick cloud of black smoke and disappeared. Nicholas, on the other hand, was extremely cunning. Taking advantage of the moment when Matthew blocked the enemy, his body suddenly stiffened, and he stood motionless in place. After the giant beheading sword cut through Matthew, it slashed at Nicholas with a whistling wind. Nicholas, who had been alive a moment ago, turned into a paper man in the next moment, instantly ignited by the abyssal fire and turned into a pile of ashes. Thousands of meters away, at the edge of the wizard tower, the space distorted and shook. Both Nicholas and Matthew emerged at the same time, vomiting blood as they staggered to the ground. Matthew's body was cut in half, and he fell to the ground askew, but he was not dead. "Come back." Matthew's upper body barely propped up from the ground, and he reached out and pointed at his bloody lower body. His lower body strangely climbed up on its own, then walked step by step to his side. Matthew put his hands on the ground, struggling to put the 2 parts of his body back together again. But as soon as it was put back together, a purple flame burst out of the wound, and he was blown away again. "Damn it, it's the abyssal fire." Matthew pounded the ground in anger, but there was nothing he could do. The flame of the powerful demon had touched the cross-section of his body, and it would be difficult to put it back together without removing the abyssal fire. Matthew could only take out the separation dagger and cut off all the parts of his body that were stained with the purple flame. Only then did he rely on strange witchcraft to put his body back together. But when he stood up again, he was half a head shorter than before. After dealing with his injuries, he had a chance to take a good look at the terrible demon that had hurt him. It was an almost perfect abyssal demon. Its sturdy and domineering body was 4 meters tall, and its weight had reached an astonishing 2,000 kilograms. Chapter 1383. There were too many different kinds of demons. In the sorcerer world, there were hundreds of books that recorded and described all kinds of abyssal demons. Even so, it was difficult for sorcerers to distinguish them one by one. However, the demon in front of them was not to be underestimated. It was an abyssal fiend that had advanced to become a high-rank demon. This meant that its original body was a grade 5 demon, but due to the sorcerer world's upper limit of power, it could only display strength at the peak of grade 4. Even so, its terror and power were still shocking. It was said that they were terrifying monsters that crawled out from the depths of the abyss. Their bodies carried abyssal flames that could never be extinguished. Wherever they went, all living things withered and all life was extinguished. They were the embodiment of death and destruction in the will of the abyss. Such a powerful demon did not even need to make a move. Its ferocious appearance and domineering aura were enough to intimidate every human sorcerer present. All the human sorcerers involuntarily retreated to the vicinity of the sorcerer tower and gathered together, carefully examining the exceptionally strong and fierce abyssal fiend. In particular, the giant beheading sword in the other party's hand was especially eye-catching. According to the books, the abyssal fiend's weapon was called the Blade of Massacre. It was a demonic weapon that was made from extremely tough abyssal metal. It had the ability to destroy souls and prevent self-healing. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but look at Matthew in unison. Could it be that the abyssal fiend had not created its own weapon? Otherwise, how could Matthew still be alive? At this moment, Matthew's face turned pale as well. He tremblingly took out a palm-sized wooden doll, its surface engraved with fine and complicated runes. From its appearance and attire, this wooden doll was 70% to 80% similar to Matthew's appearance. However, there was a deep crack that ran through the wooden doll's body, almost cutting it in half. This puppet had obviously been completely destroyed. Only then did everyone understand. It turned out that Matthew had already been killed by the demon once. It was just that the puppet had died in his place. Because of this, when everyone looked at the giant beheading sword in the abyssal fiend's hand, they could not help but reveal a trace of fear and cower in fear. Although everyone present had some hidden life-saving methods, none of them would be able to endure being slashed by the abyssal fiend's blade of slaughter. Even the 100-meter-tall Monash, who had transformed into a golden titan, would not be able to withstand it. When Gaia's gaze fell upon the giant beheading sword, his pupils involuntarily shrank. He could hear the mournful wails of the resentful ghosts on the giant's sword, and he could also feel the terrifying deterrence from the giant sword to his soul. He stood silently in front of the wizard's pagoda, continuously surveying the battlefield. But right after, he chuckled coldly. "What are you afraid of? This is our territory. If it dares to approach the wizard's pagoda, we'll skin it alive and kill it. If it doesn't dare to come close, we'll use long-range spells to deal with it." Then Monash, Gaia raised his hands to the sky once again, summoning bolts of violent lightning that were as thick as pillars. They turned into a lightning waterfall that covered 1,000 meters of the battlefield. The other wizards also followed suit. With their backs against the wizard's pagoda, they all condensed powerful violent wizard spells and began to attack the battlefield. It had to be said that the might of a level 4 wizard was not something an ordinary wizard could compare to. With the level 4 wizards showing their might, the dark mass of evil demons before them was reduced to a state of near annihilation. However, with so many evil demons dying here at the same time, the tainted flesh and evil souls in their bodies would further pollute the space here. This allowed the demonization of the area around the space crack to take another step forward. The more evil demons that died, the more power the level 5 abyssal fiend could unleash. All in all, the situation was still disadvantageous to the wizards. If only ordinary evil demons had died, the evil demon lords would naturally not care. They might even be happy to see it happen. However, there were still many of their elite subordinates and trusted clansmen on the battlefield. They could not ignore these fellows. Hence, the evil demon lords followed behind the abyssal fiend, forcing their way towards the human wizards step by step. The abyssal fiend had a massive body and was shockingly heavy. Every step it took with its hooves that resembled a goat's hooves would leave a shallow pit half a meter deep in the ground. The bottom of the pit was filled with cracks that resembled a spider's web. Wherever it went, the earth would dry up and crack. The sand, stones, and rocks would be corroded by the evil aura of the abyss. It gave off a terrifying feeling as if souls were being pulled down into the abyss. We can't let this evil demon continue growing here. Gaia's expression was solemn as he said sternly, "If we allow it to break through the limits of level 4, I'm afraid none of us here will be its match. We need to chase it out before it can adapt to the environment here. Monash, if you want to fight, count me in." A blood-red figure suddenly appeared in the air, speaking in a crisp voice. "I've long wanted to taste the blood of a high-grade evil demon. Count me in as well." This time, it was Andrews who spoke up. This was the territory of the Arden family. If they chose to give up in fear, the Arden family would be the first to suffer. Hence, he could only grit his teeth and fight. He could not afford to be lazy. Two pseudo-super beings and a Tier 4 intermediate sorcerer against a powerful Tier 5 alchemist who cultivated both magic and martial arts. Although the alchemist could only unleash the strength of a Tier 4 pinnacle sorcerer, it was still a very dangerous fight. However, since the three of them had already taken over the strongest evil demon, the rest of them had no excuse to refuse. Thus, the wizards and the evil demons roared in unison and charged at each other again. 3,000 meters above the battlefield, the giant silver warship, the Viscero, quietly floated in the air, blocking the escape route of the evil demons. This way, even if the Arden family failed, the evil demons would have to get past the warship before they could enter the nearby mortal world and start massacre. However, on the bow of the warship, a few Crimson overlords were silently watching the battle. "Teacher, are you not going?" Faced with such a bloody and terrifying dimensional battlefield, stimulated by the powerful battle intent, the Crimson Dragon bloodline in Meryl's body surged. Her blood was boiling, forcing out a pair of huge fiery wings. Her body was now densely covered in dark red dragon scales, and her usually charming and enchanting eyes had also turned into scorching dragon eyes that radiated menace in all directions. On her forehead, 2 large and 2 small fire dragon horns grew rapidly, accentuating her might as a crimson dragon witch. Feeling the violent and bloody aura from the battlefield in the distance, Meryl could no longer suppress the restlessness of the crimson dragon bloodline in her body. Behind her, Amelia, who was dressed in a soft green robe, looked nervous and full of fighting spirit. Captain Locke, who was further back, had his green face turned blood red. A strange dark red light appeared at the edge of his bean-like eyes. Wormwitch Bliss, who was at the back of the group, had his hood down and black robes covering his body, hiding his face and figure. However, just from the slight undulations of the robes, one could sense the restlessness and unease underneath. Grim, who was wearing a plain dark red leather armor, stood quietly at the bow of the warship. He looked back at Meryl, whose blood was boiling, and then at Amelia, whose face was red and who was also clenching her fists. He shook his head and smiled. "Of course I'm going. Otherwise, we might lose this space fisher today. Then we will also help you." It was a short sentence, but Meryl stuttered, her intonation fluctuating. "This is a Tier 4 battlefield we're talking about. Tier 3 existences like you will lose your lives in minutes. We are not afraid." Cough. Grimm shook his head again. With a wave of his hand, a dense layer of dark red light enveloped everyone present. Strangely enough, as soon as the layer of light enveloped them, the upper echelons of the Crimson Academy, who had been struggling just a moment ago, instantly regained their senses. Recalling their previous performance, they could not help but break out in cold sweat. "You regained your senses?" Grimm smiled. The few core members of the Crimson family lowered their heads and wiped the sweat off their foreheads. They bowed and said, "Thank you, Master, Teacher, for your help. You don't have to be ashamed. After all, this is a battlefield where two civilizations from different planes are clashing. Only Tier 4 Magi who can sense the existence of the laws can resist the temptation and erosion of the will of the abyss. All of you need to continue growing before you can participate in a battle of this level." Grimm stood there leisurely, calmly observing the battlefield in the distance. It was as if he did not care about the outcome of this battle at all. "That demon is too powerful. I'm just worried that Lady Mary will be hurt by it." Among everyone present, only Meryl dared to speak to Grimm like this with her status as a disciple. The rest of the people could only quietly listen to the conversation from the side. Although the demon was wreaking havoc in the distance, seeing how calm their master was, the upper echelons of the Crimson Academy gradually calmed down. Originally, after being infected by the will of the Abyss's tyrannical and cruel aura, all of them felt their blood boil and their morale soar. They could not wait to rush into the battlefield and start a massacre. However, with the protection of their master's law of fire, they were able to suppress the urge to slaughter deep in their hearts. Chapter 1384. When it's time to act, I will naturally act. Grimm looked at the battlefield in the distance, his expression calm and indifferent. These Central Magi usually think too highly of themselves, and they're used to being unrestrained. It won't be that easy to get them to submit. When I'm here, I naturally have a way to suppress them. But if I'm not here, how are you going to maintain the Crimson family's power? Hearing Grimm's question, everyone present could not help but be stunned. "Teacher, you're still so young. Why would you suddenly say something like that?" A worried expression appeared on Meryl's face, and her face was flushed red from the struggle. "Meryl, don't be impatient. I don't think the Lord means that." Amelia was intelligent and meticulous, and a thoughtful expression appeared on her face as she probed. "Lord Family Leader, could it be that you're about to take that step?" That step, this earth-shattering sentence, made everyone present quiver. At the same time, their eyes widened as they stared fixedly at the tall and imposing figure in front of them. This was the first time they had seen him. The fiery energy that had been surging and expanding from the Lord Family Leader's body had been swept away. At this moment, Grimm was standing in front of them. If it wasn't for his familiar voice, figure, aura, and smell, they would have thought that he was just an ordinary human. Yes, the Lord Family Leader's energy aura had been completely retracted, and what replaced it was a warmth that came from the heart and an inviolable dignity. His smile was like spring, able to infect and invade people's hearts with an invisible and intangible power, causing them to feel endless warmth. His anger was like the flames of destruction, able to ignite a person's heart in the wildest and most tyrannical manner. Previously, they had only vaguely sensed that their Lord Family Leader was powerful, but they had no idea how powerful he was. Hearing Amelia's question, everyone could not help but hold their breaths and focus, quietly waiting for their Lord Family Leader's reply. Grimm's smile became even wider. Everyone present was the Crimson family's trusted aides, so there was naturally nothing to hide. Grimm looked at the battlefield in the distance and said softly, "That step is not so easy to take. I've only found a direction. As for taking that step, I'm afraid it'll take at least 100 years." Even though Grimm's reply was nonchalant, the Crimson Corps members could hear the underlying meaning behind it. All that was left was the accumulation of time. Didn't that mean that the family head no longer had any problems in terms of resources, knowledge, and other aspects? A smooth path, Lord Patriarch's path to becoming a great sorcerer is already a smooth one. The few Scarlet Corps members' faces were filled with ecstasy and excitement, but their current identities forced them to calmly digest this news. For a time, everyone went silent, and all of them fell into boundless reverie. The Lord Patriarch's meaning was very clear. In the next 100 years, he would probably put all his energy into the training and accumulation of that step. This way, the situation in the Central Continent could only be maintained and expanded by the Crimson family. Furthermore, the few people present here were all people that the Patriarch could trust and entrust to. In the future, they would probably have to shoulder a huge responsibility. While authority and status were gratifying, without the strength to match it, it was like sitting on a volcano. Once the accumulated strength exploded, the consequences would be terrifying. Fortunately, the Crimson family had more than one rank for Magus. Apart from Grimm, there was also Mary in Arms. Arms was a pure-blooded dragon, after all. As an honorary elder of the family, he could only be a hired thug. However, to support the Crimson family and the tens of thousands of magi in the Central Continent, there was only the rank 4 Blood Queen Mary. Of course, if anyone here could take another step forward, they would also have the chance to become the leader of the Central Continent. That identity, that status, that power. Just thinking about it made the few people's ears redden, their hearts palpitate, and they found it difficult to control their emotions. Stepping into rank 5, becoming a legend, and becoming a powerful Magus like a god in the Magus world. This was something they had fantasized about countless times in the middle of the night. However, they knew very well that this was just an illusion. It seemed close, but it was actually thousands of miles away. It was not something that people of their level could reach. Hence, becoming a rank 4 Magus would enjoy endless glory and respect in the Magus world. This was the pinnacle of their lives. To other magi, this might just be a fantasy. However, to these core magi of the Crimson family, success was right in front of them. All they needed to do was put in a little bit of effort. Everyone's breathing inexplicably became heavy. Grimm did not turn around. He also knew that his trusted subordinates needed a certain amount of time to digest such a heavy piece of news. As the person closest to him, Grimm naturally hoped that Mary could continue on the path of a Magus and not get involved in the treacherous and unpredictable power struggles of the Central Continent. Hence, it was best for the Crimson family to groom a rank 4 successor as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the new Tier 4 candidate would definitely be chosen from among these people. Hence, Grimm had revealed some information in advance to stimulate their fighting spirit and ambition. Actually, ambition was not a bad thing. As long as you had the strength to match your ambition, ambition would be a source of strength that would stimulate you to continuously strive and improve. However, if you did not match up, ambition would become a disaster. It would only turn a person into a madman and torment himself to death. However, the future Crimson family would have Grimm and Mary to protect them for hundreds of years. Hence, this batch of new talents would have plenty of time to grow and strengthen themselves. As long as any one of them could successfully advance to rank 4, with the support of the Crimson family and the legendary Fire Shaman, they would immediately become a top figure in the Central Continent. Such temptation was extremely great to everyone present here, and it was to the point that they were slightly restless and unable to control their emotions. However, while their hearts were churning and thousands of thoughts were floating in their heads, blood and flesh were already flying on the distant battlefield, and the plan was revealed. After a bloodbath, 3 out of the 5 demon lords and a high-grade alchemist were heavily injured by the Magi. They were the Quasar, the Balrog, and the 6-armed snake demon. However, the Magi still lost this battle. The reason for their failure was that no one could defend against the Abyssal Alchemist's unbridled attacks. Indeed, Monash Gaia, Mary, and Andrews had gathered. Gaia, Mary, and Andrews had only barely managed to hold off the Abyssal Alchemist. On the other hand, the Abyssal Alchemist relied on its demonic teleportation spell to move freely across the battlefield. Wherever it went, everyone avoided it. The terrifying demonic teleportation spell and the terrifying blade of massacre. Every time the Abyssal Alchemist attacked, it meant that a rank 4 magus had to face a life-or-death battle. The rank 4 magi had to contend with the powerful enemies while being wary of the Abyssal Alchemist's sneak attacks. To be honest, this kind of battle was excruciating. Of everyone present, perhaps only Mary could use her extraordinary agility to catch up to the Abyssal Alchemist. However, she could not do it alone. Without being able to lure the Abyssal Alchemist into the Nightmare Castle, she could only display the strength of a mid-rank 4 magus. With this strength, it was obvious that it was not enough to stop the Abyssal Alchemist's onslaught. The only one who had the strength to face the Abyssal Alchemist head-on was Monash Gaia. However, his 100-meter-tall body meant that his every movement was slow. Trying to catch up to the Abyssal Alchemist was simply wishful thinking. If he forced himself too hard and the Abyssal Alchemist suddenly turned around, even Gaia might not be able to protect himself. Even Gaia could not guarantee that he would not be injured by the strange blade of massacre. Hence, a comical scene akin to an eagle catching a chick appeared on the battlefield. Mary danced around the Abyssal Alchemist like a tiny dragonfly, but she was unable to break through its defenses. The tall and mighty gold titan chased closely behind the alchemist fiend, bombarding it with lightning bolts. However, the Abyssal Alchemist did not seem to care about this. It swayed its heavy body as it rampaged across the battlefield, chasing after pale-faced human magi without the slightest scruple. Every now and then, it would activate a precise teleportation spell, silently appearing beside a rank 4 magus and brandishing its greatsword with a sinister smile on its face. The terrifying greatsword burned with abyssal flames, and every time it attacked, it would kill something. The stronger humans might be able to rely on their resilient souls to resist the terrifying power, but those who were not strong enough could only rely on puppets or voodoo dolls to escape the fate of having their souls shattered. In truth, the Abyssal Alchemist alone was enough to cause a huge ruckus among the Magi. Every time it disappeared from its original spot, all the Magi present could not help but feel a sense of danger, and all of them felt it chilled down their spines. There was no helping it. The Abyssal Alchemist's attacks were too sharp, and if they failed to block it, they would die. They could not help but feel worried and fearful. Up until now, there had not been any direct casualties among the rank 4 Magi. However, at this rate, it was only a matter of time before 1 or 2 rank 4 Magi died. The human Magi's decline could no longer be concealed, and defeat was inevitable. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.